Somewhere far, far away, in the distant kingdom, there is a village called Chong, hidden in the province of Shanxi. And so, out of the blue, a whole crowd of servants gathers in the house of the Song family, who serve the head faithfully and truly. The Song family is the leader of a noble sect, and they have lived in this small village in Shanxi province for over 100 years. They became famous in their time for their white jade sword, and the whole village is openly proud of them. The Song sect proudly bears the title of Noble Sword, but the head has one headache. The head of the Song family is a noble swordsman named Song Bujong. He is currently training his second son, the young Son Baek. But suddenly, Jung gets angry. His son is doing everything wrong again. And Baek immediately makes kittenish eyes and babbles something to his father. Baek admits he screwed up again. Jung gets even more angry and growls. Is this how a son of the Song family should behave? The boys watch from the sidelines and exchange glances. Here we go again. Isn't he being too harsh with the 7-year-old? But they still can't do anything. Meanwhile, the eldest son of the Song family, named Son Yeon, pays no attention to this whole mess. He just keeps honing his skills. He gives it his all and displays true mastery of the blade. The boys look at this and whisper. The elder master seems completely invincible. At his age, he's already mastered the Song family's 4 traits technique. What's more, he's already devoured the 3 books and books on military tactics. That's why the younger one is so outmatched by the older one, and why Chang is so harsh with him. And then one of the guys suddenly remembers. Listen, we need to stop the chief somehow. The second one nods, as if to say, she might intervene. Chan explains to the boy that he's doing the technique crookedly. Baek trembles with fear, repeats the movements, and asks plaintively, is this correct? Chan gets even more angry and starts shouting. But then a young woman approaches and asks them to stop. As soon as Chan hears his wife's voice, he instantly cools down. Baek, meanwhile, rushes to his mother and clings to her. Chan says to his wife, it's because you coddle him that he's growing up so soft. The woman doesn't answer. Just with one look, she makes it clear he's wrong. And Chan immediately bites his tongue. She reminds him, he's only 7. What does he expect from such a little thing? The little boy is whining like a dog on the hottest afternoon, Chan counters. But the guy was born into a family of warriors. He just needs to be a little stricter. The woman immediately cuts him off. So what? Does he really want to make Baek a copy of Yeon? A kid who doesn't smile at 13, pays 0 attention to his mother, and waves a sword from morning to night? Yen was such a sweet little boy, and Chan molded him into a son who is not interested in anything at all. And just then, Yen decides to catch his breath and sees his father and mother bickering. It seems strangely unusual to him. The woman tells her husband, he already pushed the older one, but she will never allow Baek to be raised the same way. Yen grins. There they go again. And that, by his standards, is happiness. He immediately looks up at the blue sky and drifts off into dreams. Late in the evening, thunder suddenly rumbles, and at the same moment, a downpour begins. Chan looks at the sky and mutters, where did this rain come from? And it doesn't look like he'll calm down anytime soon. Looks like I'll have to take a break from training tomorrow. I can't swing a sword under such a flood. He immediately recalled his wife's words, that the children would catch a cold, and he knew perfectly well that she would make a fuss again. Chan looks at the blade he'd taken as a trophy and admits, Baek isn't the only one to blame. He's the one who's let things slide at the estate. Chan decides to stretch his legs a bit, and, taking his magic blade, begins to produce something truly magnificent. And then, in this rainy gloom, Yen wanders across the yard and freezes in place, seeing his father training. Roots that grow deep into the ground are frost-resistant. But to ensure the greenery lasts year-round, it needs to be protected from hurricane winds and winter cold. His father achieved the 8 traits of the family technique. Sleep. His tree is evergreen. Chan finishes training and asks why his son is here so late. Yang replies, the general was looking for him, so he came to report. Chan asks again, surprised. General? Yang confirms, yes, some old woman is asking to wait out the rain. Chang frowned. What kind of old woman was this at this hour? Young replied. He knew strangers weren't allowed in here, but she seemed to be in a completely hopeless situation, so he decided to ask permission. Should he refuse her? Chan says no, he'll go check it out himself. But suddenly he freezes and asks his son, what was his father's path? Yang is taken aback and for a moment completely collapses. Chan wonders, is this really asking too much? No matter how gifted Yang is, asking him about 8 traits is a bit much. And then Yen answers, his father's path is green, like the roots of a tree, firmly rooted in the earth to withstand the winds. That's why the tree itself remains evergreen. Chan immediately bursts into laughter. He knew Yang was capable, but this is beyond all bounds. At such a young age, they're already discussing family techniques with him. Yen is perplexed. What is his father even talking about? Chan suddenly tosses his sword into his hands. Here you go. Yen catches the blade, completely unprepared for this turn of events. Chang orders. Starting tomorrow, he must begin mastering the way of white jade. He's already prepared. Young objects, but only the head of the family can possess white jade. The chief dismisses it. It's just a good sword. A sharp blade belongs to someone who knows how to use it properly. Chan beams and says, his mood has improved so much that he is ready to give up even his own bedroom to the old woman. Chan approaches the gate and asks the old woman, is she heading to the Huazhong temple? The old woman replies, I wanted to make an offering to the Buddha. After all, her beloved son was taken to war and returned headless. She wants to pray for the negligent mother who failed to protect her child, to beg forgiveness and meet him in heaven. The head thinks and says, let her come in. They'll show her a room, and in the morning they'll send someone from the temple to escort her. The granny seems surprised by these words and replied, the vile old woman does not deserve such treatment. With such merits, his fame would spread throughout Shaanxi province. She said, believed in his good name, and with such a character, he would never show his back to the poor old woman. And at that very moment, she blows a poison needle from a tube directly into the head. The chieftain falls to the ground and asks the old woman what she's doing. She replies, she's well prepared. They're considered just a village sect, but they're among the top 3 in Shaanxi province. It would be a shame if he turned out to be stronger than she'd expected. Chan grabs the blade and throws it with one swing of his hand. It's still too early for him to die, and he chops off her head. After this, Chan falls to her knees and coughs up blood. What a damn hypocrite! And then, unexpectedly, the old woman turns out to be still alive and advises him not to overexert himself. He's been poisoned by the 7 steps in pursuit of the soul poison, and the more he moves, the more intense the pain will be. It turns out that Granny's body was just an empty shell. Suddenly, a boy crawls out of it. Chan asks, who are you? The boy grins. Does it matter? The Song family will be wiped off the face of the earth today anyway. Chan goes berserk and lunges at him, yelling at him to shut up. But the boy calmly advises him to take his time. The boy decides to show what he is capable of, and suddenly, long claws grow from his hands, with which he repels the chief's attack. Chan has no intention of giving up and unleashes powerful blows, but suddenly sees how this guy's claws bite right into his blade. The boss instantly jumps back and realizes it's corrosion, but there's no metal that can corrode steel. This technique definitely belongs to Blood Demon Shi. Shi praises Master Song, truly impressive. He continues to move forward, even while poisoned. Chang asks what brings the henchman of the head of a demonic cult here. Shi replies, owning something you can't control yourself? That's a reason for anger. The leader doesn't understand and asks again what he's talking about. Shi blurts out, a white jade sword! That same white jade sword that had claimed countless lives in war. The old man was impressed by its power and wanted it for himself. This means the jade sword will be the first trophy of the Central Plains. The first piece from the True Demon Society will be obtained by the Blood Demons. Chan takes stock and realizes the demonic cult is stirring again. It looks like this is the advance guard. They'll be attacking soon. And if it's as he said, the extermination of the Song family is inevitable. At least the jade sword is now in Yong's possession. Now they need to leave before reinforcements arrive. She asks, "What's wrong with him? What's with that strange pose? Is he really about to give his final fight?" Chan immediately shouts at the Song children to survive at any cost. After all, the roots of the Song family are in them. Yeon is frozen with horror as she watches her father rush to cover them, but his mother grabs his hand. He can't go there. Yong begs her to let him go. He's going to his father. The woman firmly replies, "This is the head of the family's order. Does he dare disobey him?" Yen can't come to terms with this, and watching his father fight alone, he hopes with all his might that he will survive. Baek asks his mother why he needs to get dressed. She replies, he and his brother are going on a trip. Baek is perplexed. Why did his brother turn away? At that moment, Yeon is tormented by the question. Was it right to run away, abandoning his father? It would have been better to send the younger one away with his mother. Mother turns to Yeon and tells him to take this symbol. It's the Song family crest, ascending dragons, proof of their lineage. Yen shudders and immediately understands. His mother is planning to stay here too. She silently hugs her eldest son goodbye. Yen's mother tells him he's all grown up now, and she can't understand how she never noticed it before. Yeon can't take it anymore and starts crying too. His mother calls Baek to come over to them. She orders the younger one to obey his brother. From that day on, the two of them are one, and therefore they must never be separated. Baek is surprised. One whole? Mother replies, brothers are friends sent from heaven, and therefore their friendship is not a duty, but a privilege, and Baek must follow his brother like a father. And Yeon must lead his brother on the right path. Mother asks if they understand. They're already descending into the secret passage, and Baek asks, won't Mother come with them? The mother replies, they'll go ahead, and she and the father will follow. Baek is surprised. Is this like a game of hide and seek? The mother replies, that's right, it's like hide and seek, a very long game of hide and seek. Without martial arts, she'll only be a burden to them. This is what's best for them. They must survive at any cost. And let them be happy. Then the eldest servant notices strangers have entered the territory and asks who they are. But he immediately receives a blade to the chest. Meanwhile, Chan continues to fight, but he's almost exhausted. She chuckles. Master Song, he's holding up well. For the first time, he fights with someone who has stood firm against a member of the She-Blood Demon tribe for so long. But he's already getting bored. Let him give them the white jade immediately. Then he'll kill him without any pain. Chan wonders if the children have managed to get to safety. He then challenges the demon. Fortunately, it seems the heavens don't wish for the Song family's downfall today. Chan glares at him and growls at him to come already. The demon laughs. No matter what, everyone must assume it was all a setup by the other sex. Even though he's poisoned by the 7 steps to the soul and the venom of She's blood demons, Chang decides to show him who's boss. The demon didn't expect this and didn't even have time to dodge. Chan cut him into small pieces. In the end, the demon only asks, how did he manage to do this? And at that very moment, he says goodbye to life. Chan considers this and rejoices. These two poisons don't mix well. Both are rare, which is why he managed to balance them, but his time is running out. And suddenly, someone behind him says, the Song family's technique has earned its fame for good reason. Turning around, he sees demons who have invaded his clan. The demon remarks, Son has dealt with the blood demon, but what if the 12 swords of the true demon society came against him? What would he do then? After the Lost War, their demon cult languished in a humiliating position for 40 years. The true demon society has always been at the forefront of martial arts development. The demon lord orders his men to bring back the Song family's white jade sword as his first trophy. The fall of the Song family will mark the end of an era of humiliation. He immediately orders his men to destroy everyone and everything in the village. That's his order. Meanwhile, Chan realizes there are still these demons left to kill, and he needs to hold out just a little longer. Chan asks what the demon cult's dogs are doing here. A guy emerges from the crowd and replies, they need to sort this out before the leader arrives. Having given the order to his subordinates, he and all of them together pounce on the head of the Song family. Meanwhile, Yen and his brother flee underground, hoping to escape the threat. But Yen is haunted by the fact that he left his father to fight alone. Baek turns to his brother and asks him to slow down. Yeon replies, "The main thing is to be patient a little longer." But suddenly Baek runs out of energy and falls to the ground. Yeon breaks abruptly and asks what he's doing. Baek replies that he won't go any further. Yeon begs him to get up. They don't have time for that. The boy says he's having a hard time and has no more strength. He decides to wait for his mother right here. Yeon flares up and, grabbing his brother's hand, orders him to move faster. But Baek resists and insists he doesn't want to. And then suddenly the earth shakes so hard that everything shakes. Yen freezes. What's going on there? Baek pulls his brother by the sleeve and, pointing his finger, shouts at him, "Look here!" Meanwhile, Chan fights alone against several demons and even manages to finish off a couple of them. And then a bully rushes at him, screaming for Chan to die. The boss notices this and instantly prepares to take the blow. With one movement of his hand, Chan unleashes a powerful energy on the enemy and smashes his weapon to pieces. His devastating attack never runs out of steam. Passing through the weapon, it reaches the enemy himself, cutting off his arm. By this time, a woman runs up and says to him, "What is he messing around there for? He's almost dead." She makes her way to him with all her might and grumbles, "What an intractable man." But at that very moment, she suddenly froze in amazement. Headmaster Chan released his most powerful magic. At that moment, the woman thinks, "What is this? He's about to die. And where did this crushing feeling of horror come from?" But then, the head of the demons himself appears and calls his subordinates idiots. He warned that Song Chan is a difficult opponent. The woman turns around sharply and, looking at the roof of the house, sees that the head himself has arrived. The leader takes in the situation and orders his true demon warriors to proceed. Chan is not at all afraid and, looking at them all, angrily throws out, "This place will become their grave." Chan transforms into a monster, realizing his family is in danger, and, cutting each one down, he promises he will leave no one alive. The woman looks at all this and can't believe her eyes. Could Sung Chan's martial arts really be that powerful? She'd heard the rumors, but she hadn't thought he was that good. And then the leader comes up to her and says, "Yeah, he was just playing with them." The woman is taken aback. "What?" She immediately asks the boss to give them a little more time. He replies, he'll just wait and see how things get going. His old friend. The woman hears all this and wonders, what is he even talking about? Meanwhile, Chan is fighting the demons and dealing with them surprisingly easily. He realizes he just needs a little more. And then the demon leader notices. As expected, he stopped at the 8th line. Chan suddenly recognizes this familiar voice and, turning around, sees that the leader of the demons himself is attacking him. He easily repels this attack. The leader throws out to Chan. It turns out they haven't seen each other for a long time. Chan is stunned and asks, "Why him?" The leader replies, he'll just say it's not a personal grudge, and he sees that he hasn't lost his strength yet. The woman watches this fierce duel and can't believe her eyes. Why are they fighting with the same martial art? The demon lord remarks that the Song family's techniques are still excellent. Chan snaps at him, telling him not to embarrass himself. How dare a fugitive even mention the Song family's techniques? The demon leader agrees. Yes, as Chan said, he's a fugitive. But even a healthy pine tree can be destroyed. And then Chan sees that his sword is cracking. This bastard hit right in the place affected by corrosion. The demon leader reminds. Chan knows that without the jade sword, the Song technique only hits at half strength, right? But at that very moment, a cry of pain comes from beneath the ground. It's Baek. The demon leader suddenly freezes and strains to listen. He immediately turns his gaze to where the wall has collapsed and sees children hiding underneath. By this time, his subordinates arrive and bring the head's wife, who immediately falls to her knees. Chan is furious when he sees his wife. He shouts at her. "Why is she here? What happened to the children?" The woman turns to the head of the demons. They haven't seen each other for a long time. The demon replies, he didn't want to meet her like this. The woman leaves him. He's still as stupid as ever. She thought he'd learned in the past that nothing could be achieved this way, and nothing would change in the future. The demon listens and mutters, "What boring last words." Chan sees that things are bad and understands that he doesn't want to allow this to happen. The woman turns to her husband and says she was happy to meet him. The demon leader immediately swings his blade and kills her. Chan sees all this and, mad with rage, rushes to his wife. He grabs her head and keeps asking, "Why?" Chan shouts at the demon, "Why did he kill his wife, who had nothing to do with them at all?" The demon asks again, "Didn't he tell him?" He bears no personal grudge. She's only guilty of possessing something beneath her rank and of not having the strength to protect it. Chan asks, "Is that all, just because?" But then the demon notices the boy is evolving, and with a wave of his hand, intercepts his blade. As soon as he clenches his mighty blade, his aura rises so menacingly that it fills everyone around with terror. The demon lord instantly understands. This is the Great Void, the ultimate technique, sleep, accessible only to those who have reached the 9 traits. Has he really surpassed his limit in rage? The demon throws, but his technique won't reach him. Chan is right there, barking at him to shut up. A powerful explosion follows. Chan's blade freezes right in front of the demon's face, and freezes. The demon says, "He warned me that Chan is beyond his powers." Meanwhile, his subordinates throw chains around Chan and drag him away from the leader. Chan blurts out, "The day will come when the children of the Song family will kill him." The demon immediately raises his blade and replies, "He will wait." The demon kills his friend and drops him. This is not how he wanted to pay for the wound he received. But then a subordinate approaches him and reports something. The boss asks what happened. The subordinate replies, "They found a secret passage." The boss asks in surprise, "A secret passage?" And then he remembers the recent scene and understands everything. These were Songbu Chan's children. But otherwise, collecting the debt would have been completely boring. The leader orders his men. "They're leaving!" The subordinate is taken aback. "What?" And the woman also asks what he's up to. After all, the Song family's children probably took the white jade sword with them. If the elders find out, they let them off the hook like that. The leader snaps. She still hasn't realized that the Song family's technique and the jade sword were just a pretext. He hadn't intended to indulge the old man's passion for collecting trinkets from the start. The woman replies, "They won't let it go so easily." The head immediately laughs. For the sake of fun, once every 10 years, it's worth enduring. The woman looks at the head of the house in shock and wonders, what the hell is he up to? Reaching home, Baek asks his brother why he's doing this. Their father is wounded. Why are they running away? He waves his arms and asks his brother, why? His brother is strong. Why are they running away? Baek falls to his knees and cries through tears that he won't forgive. It turns out his brother is a coward. Yang, at a loss for words for his brother, kneels before him and embraces him as his elder brother. Baek immediately feels brotherly love, but Baek yells at him to let go, calling him a coward. And Yeon won't let him, hugging him even tighter. Yen tells his brother. He swears that he will definitely take revenge on them, and no one will let this go. Baek replies, "There's no point in revenge. They'll be much better off if they just go to mom and dad." The next morning, the boys reach Beijing and, throwing on raincoats, try to hide their faces. But suddenly, Baek notices a girl nearby buying food and sighs tiredly and heavily. Yeon asks his brother if he's hungry. Baek is surprised by the question, doesn't answer, and steps aside. Yang reflects and realizes, since that day, Baek hasn't spoken a word for several days. He still hasn't come to his senses. Yen tells his brother, "Then don't go anywhere and wait for him here. He'll go look for food." At this moment, Baek is at a loss and wants to stop his brother, but he can't get a word out. But deep down, he knows. He doesn't want Yang to abandon him. Let him starve, as long as his brother stays by his side. And then Baek remembers how his brother promised to never abandon him, and he clenches his fist tightly. Baek relents and tells his brother to come back quickly. Meanwhile, Yeon begs people for food, but everyone refuses, and someone even splashes water in his face. The man growls, "Being a beggar in the morning means trouble. Let him think he got off easy. Next time, he'll get beat up." Yen thinks. He knew the townspeople were callous, but he didn't think they were this callous. And yet, with so many people, at least someone had to help. While he is wandering along the main road in the hope of getting food, several people notice him from the alley and follow him. They slowly creep behind him, trying not to give themselves away. But Yen turns around abruptly. What do they want? The man grins. It's nothing special. They've just seen him get chased away a couple of times already. He looks hungry, so let him come with them. They'll feed him. How does he feel about this offer? Yen immediately realizes these people want his white jade. Luckily, few here are proficient in martial arts. These look more like local gangsters, but there are too many of them. Yen decides it's best to run away and immediately takes off. The man commands his men, "Stop! Let them catch him immediately. Take him alive." Yen realizes he'd been overconfident. He thought they'd be safe once they got out of Shanxi province, but it's not just martial artists who pose a threat to them. We need to get Baek and head to Liaodong. At this moment, a large carriage rolls through the city, and a girl, leaning out the window, looks around with wide eyes. The old man turns to Su Ren. If she keeps sticking out like that, she might fall out. Ren laughs and asks the old man whose student she is. He replies, she's overexcited, having ventured into the city for the first time in a long time. He's one of the 4 heads of the Damo Murima school. The old man thinks, even in a spacious Murima school, a child will sooner or later become bored. Sometimes it's worth taking her out. But suddenly the old man senses something is about to happen. At that very moment, Ren loses control and tumbles out of the cart. As she falls, she sees that she is flying face down onto a sharp rock, and she closes her eyes so as not to see it. But after a couple of seconds, she opens her eyes and finds herself standing right in front of the stone. The old man, saving her, put all his magic into it and caught her right in the air so that she would not get hurt. The old man asks, is this really his student? The one who fell out of the cart and almost hit her head on a rock? Ren smiles. Well, of course. She is the student of a caring man who will not leave his beloved student to die. The old man looks at her and replies, she's quite the talker, though. And then Ren suddenly asks the teacher to wait. The old man instantly turns off the magic, and she falls. Ren, landing, grumbles, this is too much. She did something wrong, of course, but to drop her like that? Ren pauses and asks why the cart has stopped. But looking around, he sees a guy lying right in front of it. Ren immediately runs up to him and begs him to wake up. Yen opens his eyes and sees a girl. Ren is overjoyed. She's already happy that the guy is at least breathing. But why is his face so handsome? Yen is rambling something incoherent and calling the girl Mom. The teacher approaches Ren and remarks, she would have died long ago if she was staring at him so intently. Ren denies everything. Nothing of the sort. The teacher says, since the student has a crush on this guy, he'll have to be saved. Ren flushes and blushes at the teacher's words. He asks her to be quiet. He needs to feel her pulse. The teacher realizes. Fortunately, the boy simply collapsed unconscious from exhaustion. Judging by his build, he looks like a well-trained child from a family of warriors. What happened to him? But suddenly, his gaze catches on this guy's sword. At that moment, a man comes up and says, finally, I got you. He was hiding like a rat. The man demands the old man give him his sword. He says the sword belongs to him. The teacher looks at the blade and asks again, they say it's theirs? The man replies, exactly. And if it gets in the way, it definitely won't get out in one piece. The teacher lifts the boy up and asks, how dare this man claim the sword that has cut off the heads of countless followers of a demonic cult? The men sense his powerful energy and cannot understand. How can this old man be so strong? Meanwhile, Baek stands in the very spot where his older brother left him. He steps aside and sits quietly, silently. Baek remembers what his brother told him earlier in the forest. And, watching him, he wonders, what is he doing? It's time for bed. and it's too noisy here. His brother told him to be quiet because of his pursuers, but he himself makes the most noise. Baek is angry at his brother, considers him a coward, and is not going to forgive him for anything. But suddenly something clicks. Baek turns his gaze to the stove and sees a medal lying next to him. Yeon said it was the Song family crest, the rising dragon. If they split up, that would be all he'd have left. Yeon looked up at the sky and told his brother he wouldn't abandon him. Baek remembered it all and, clutching the sign in his hand, burst into tears. He realized his brother had abandoned him and decided to go his own way. But at that very moment, the very same cart that Yeon had collapsed in front of rolled past. The teacher immediately notices the boy. He seems very unusual to him. Meanwhile, Yeon lies unconscious, and Ren monitors his condition. Baek goes on his way, and, going over everything in his head, repeats. His own brother Yeon abandoned him, the head of one of the 4 most powerful cults. This title belongs to the 4 most powerful cult masters who participated in the Great War against the demonic cult 40 years ago. And after that Great War, they retired and founded a cult, the Marima School, sacred to all cultists. In the Marima School infirmary, Yeon screams for release. After all, his brother is waiting for him. The teacher replies, "What a pity! If he'd known his brother was still there, he wouldn't have taken him away so thoughtlessly. He shouldn't worry. He's already sent someone, so he should just wait." Yeon immediately jumps out of bed. He has to go. And with tear-stained eyes, he repeats, his brother will be waiting for him. The teacher reassures the boy. Don't worry, they'll definitely find him. He swears by the name of one of the 4 heads. Ren also agrees. It's true. Her teacher never lies. But Yeon doesn't believe them, and, having waited until evening, immediately decides to slip away to find his brother. The guy considers and realizes the promise of one of the 4 chapters is unbreakable. But he doesn't have time to wait. How deep is he in the mountains? He's been going for quite a while, but the grief still seems endless. Now it's clear why no one knows the location of the Marima School. But suddenly, on his way, he sees a strange man walking towards him. Yeon takes one look at his equipment and notices 3 swords, 3 paths, unusual clothing. And it seems he's heard of him somewhere. It's clear as day that this is a martial arts master. He needs to act natural. There shouldn't be any bad people near the Marima School, but Yeon passes by without saying a word. And the stranger, drawing level with him, drops his sword. He has a fine one. Yeon immediately realizes that things are bad and suddenly pulls out his blade, putting it to the man's jaw. The stranger asks, "What's wrong with him?" The old man merely praised his path. Yeon replies, "Everyone who says that is coveting his sword," and he orders him to stand still while he quietly leaves. The man calls Yeon a kid and says he seems to have misunderstood something. He has enough swords of his own. Yeon tells him to be quiet and stand still. The man tells the boy he's jumping to conclusions. With one light touch, he tosses him aside. Yeon manages to land on his feet and can't believe it. Where does such strength come from? Just from touching the sword with his hand? The man laughs. He was right. In the boy's hands is a very expensive white jade. Yeon is stunned. This stranger recognized the white jade? Is it possible that... And then he remembers the conversation with his father. Yeon asked his father if it was true that their grandfather was a hero of the Great War. The headmaster replied, "It's true. Their grandfather saved the Murim along with one of the 4 school heads." Yeon said, "That is why they gave him the white jade that destroyed countless numbers of cultists." The leader replied, "Exactly so." The sword had seen much, being Han Hel's blade. Their grandfather had been strong too, but he said that Han Hel's might was unmatched among the 4 leaders. Baek smiled. "So Han Hyul is the strongest?" The leader replied, "Exactly. After the Great War, there even appeared a saying." Baek asked which one. The leader replied, 3 swords and 3 paths. If you meet Han Hyul, run." Yeon suddenly realizes, how could he have forgotten? It's not often you meet a man who carries 3 swords. If he's right, and then the stranger says he doesn't understand what's going on. But Yeon already realizes, before him stands the strongest, Han Hyul. The man notices. Only a few have ever held a sword to his throat and survived. Yeon thinks. He looks young, but this is definitely one of the 4 leaders, Han Hyul. Running from him is pointless. What should he do? Khan sees. The boy has probably figured out who's standing in front of him, but his eyes are blazing with fighting spirit. For the first time in a long time, he sees something interesting. The Khan offers the boy a deal. If he gets the old man to draw at least 1 sword within 20 seconds, he'll let him go. And if he loses, he'll become his apprentice. Yen is taken aback by this proposal and doesn't know what to say. Han asks Yen, is he so happy to become his student? He shouldn't be shy, kid. This old man will make him the strongest after himself. Yang tells Han to keep his word. If he makes him draw his sword, he'll let him go. 2 years later, in the village, a buyer comes to the seller and says, "Here is the money for the goods." The salesman smirks. What kind of man is he? He hands over the money without even checking the goods. The man replies, "Old man O's goods are always impeccable." The salesman calls out to Son Baek and tells him to bring the goods. Baek brings them and asks the old man where to put them. The man glances at the boy and says, "How time flies. It's been 2 years since he picked him up, right?" He was worried then. The boy was so frail. But how quickly he grew up. Just like then, he's still a silent man. The old man agrees with the man. On the way home, he takes a closer look at the boy and sees that he's not like ordinary kids. Judging by his build, he's studied martial arts, but he never told his story. The old man asks Paek if he wants to go home. Paek is surprised by the question and answers, no, his home is here. But upon reaching the house, he suddenly asks, is someone visiting them? The old man notices a familiar face and, running up, asks, why didn't he warn him about the visit? And then the warrior takes off his wide-brimmed hat and answers the blacksmith O. It's been a while since they've seen each other. This is the general of the East. The old man immediately falls to his knees to greet the general. A girl emerges from behind the guest and announces that she is also here. Seeing the girl, Paek suddenly becomes embarrassed and blushes. The girl asks, who is this? Meanwhile, Paek sits under a tree and examines the cart. He says his family had one just like it. But suddenly, someone asks him what he's doing. Turning around, he sees the same girl approaching. The girl greets and introduces herself. Her name is Tan Bani. What is the boy's name? Paek is completely at a loss and doesn't know what to say to her. But then the guard snaps him out of it. He needs to answer when spoken to. Bonnie doesn't listen to her guard and sits down next to him, and the guy is seriously scared of her. That's what he didn't expect. Paek asks what she's doing. Bonnie replies, she introduced herself again. She's 9, and how old is he? Paek blushes and, up close, sees that she's even more beautiful. He introduces himself and says he's 11. Bonnie is surprised. So he's like an older brother to her. Paek thinks, puzzled. What older brother? Bonnie says, since that's how it turned out, let Baek call her Lime. The guy is surprised. Lime? Bonnie replies, that's right, Lime, and then notices that his face has turned red. Are you sick by any chance? Paek replies, no, he's fine. And the guard seethes inwardly. How dare this little guy talk to her like that? Does he even realize who's laughing and chatting with him right now? If he knew who she was, he wouldn't even dare look up. She is the daughter of the man who stands at the very pinnacle of a 1,000,000-strong army. Except for His Majesty the Emperor, he wields more power than anyone else. The precious unmarried daughter of the Minister of War and the Army General. And this country boy dares, but suddenly, Lime bursts out laughing and asks Paek what it is. And she's incredibly curious to get to know him better. The warrior is amazed and wonders, when was the last time she smiled so sincerely? It's the first time he's seen her smile since the death of her elder mistress. Such a sincere smile. Frankly, he was afraid the trip would be too much for her. But it was still good that she went. As he's leaving, Lime shouts to his brother Baek and suggests, let them have even more fun next time. The warrior is frightened when he sees her leaning out of the window and tells the lady that it is dangerous. Baek watches them go by, thinking, "This Tonbani girl is really strange." But suddenly, the old man notices. So that's what his face might look like. Baek denies it. It's not like that. The old man says, they'll meet again in a month, and so, starting tomorrow, they'll be up to their necks in work. And she calls the guy into the house. It's already getting cold. Baek understands he'll have to endure it for a month. Every day, without a break, the old man forges the general's sword and works until he's sweating. But suddenly Baek approaches him and says he's brought water. The old man praises him and invites him to come over. He's about to show him something. The old man tells the boy, from today on, he'll be helping him repair his weapons. After all, this is the first time he's seen anything other than farm equipment. But glancing at the sword, Baek immediately recognizes what kind of blade it is. The old man remarks, for the past 2 years, the boy has only stared at tools, but he recognized the sword at first glance. Apparently, he knows his way around. He may be silent about his past, but this child is certainly from a family of warriors. Baek remembers what he didn't understand as a child, but now he knows. Why their house turned out like this? Because of one piece of metal. All because of one damn piece of metal. And then the old man tells the boy, it's just a sword. Baek is surprised. What is he talking about? The old man replies, he told you so. If a weapon falls into the hands of a bad man, it will bring evil. But in the hands of a knight, it will become a righteous blade. The sword in his hands belongs to one who leads millions. This blade protects them from enemies from the north. The old man tells Baek, you can't live in hatred. You have to live looking forward, into the future. Baek sees that his grandfather has been fixing the general's sword for days, but he still doesn't understand what he means. Living with an eye on the future. What does that mean? But it seems Grandpa truly cares about him. There are very few people left who truly care about him. His mother and father, who always protected him and worried about him. And that strange girl. And he hopes they'll meet again in a few days. And then Baek comes to the house and shouts to the old man that he's back. But suddenly, he drops the water, seeing his grandfather lying unconscious on the floor. Baek doesn't hesitate and calls the doctor to examine his grandfather. The doctor tells the boy to give him this twice a day, starting today. Baek asks, will he get better then? The doctor replies, it will only ease his pain. And the boy immediately realizes that things are bad. At parting, the doctor tells the boy, the old man is a very good man. Let him bury him in a good place. But suddenly, late at night, the old man wakes up coughing and decides to get to his feet. He begins to blame the heartless heavens. If only they would give him at least a little time to finish the sword. He suddenly freezes and thinks about Son Baek, how sorry he feels for him. But then there's a knock, and he asks, who's there at this hour? But when he goes outside, the old man is stunned. The boy Baek is trying to finish the sword that the general left behind. Baek takes out all his anger on the blade and realizes he's been abandoned again. And all because of his helplessness, like his mother and father, like his brother and grandfather. They all leave because of his helplessness. And he can't let that happen. And then Baek makes a huge vow to himself. He will never lose anyone again, no matter the cost. The old man looks at him and sees how hard he's trying. But suddenly he remembers the doctor's words, that he wouldn't last another year. It would be better for him to put everything aside and live through this time peacefully. In a year, he said, he would have no regrets. But the eyes of the orphan, who wandered everywhere, were too sad. It was a small whim of a dying old man. That day, he asked the boy if he was hungry. The old man actually thought he'd leave him later, but in the end, he was the one left to go. And then the old man tells the boy, if he continues, he'll only ruin the blade. Baek turns around. Grandpa? The old man says he screamed so loudly it scared him half to death. Baek asks if he's okay. The doctor said otherwise. The old man replies, this charlatan predicted his imminent death 2 years ago, so he shouldn't worry. Baek rejoices. Really? The old man immediately asks, How dare he smile when he almost lost such a precious sword? Peck throws up his hands. It's all wrong! The old man says, it's a joke. Actually, this time the sound of the impact was quite good. And then Peck rejoices and considers this a blessing. And he sees that his grandfather has gotten much better. The old man tells the boy to finish the sword. Peck is surprised. Is he serious? The old man replies, he's had enough of messing around with empty assignments. He's quite capable of this now. And then Peck feels his hands tremble. Finally, he's been recognized. The key to working with steel is temperature, and then smelting. The old man tells the boy, forging a sword is a continuous and arduous process. Just like life. Having gone through difficult, exhausting times, one day he will definitely achieve his goal. But suddenly, after delivering the final blow, Peck shudders and realizes it's that very sound, the sound that's made when iron fuses. Peck turns around and shouts to his grandfather that he's done it. But he sees that his grandfather isn't moving or responding. Peck didn't expect such an outcome, and in fear even dropped his sword to the floor. He walked over and told his grandfather that it was that very sound that had come out. Peck begs his grandfather to open his eyes. He managed to forge the sword correctly. Peck hugs his grandfather and realizes that this is the end, and bursts out screaming at the top of his lungs. Oh Jung-dong's death resonates with more than just grief. Beck cries out in realization. Everyone who loved him is gone. A few days later, the general returns for his sword. Lime pokes his head out again and asks how much longer the journey will be. The guard tells her it's dangerous. The general asks, does she really want to see Brother Son? The general sees that she seems to have taken a liking to this guy Peck. What a silly girl. And then Lime screams with joy. They're arriving. Lime immediately enters and shouts to Brother Son that she's here. And she sees Beck lying there with his sword, asleep. Beck tells them everything in detail, and even shows them Grandfather O's grave where he buried him. Lime can't contain her emotions and immediately bursts into tears. The guard says it's cold outside and calls her back to the carriage. Lime digs in his heels and insists that Brother Son is going through a very difficult time. And the general is upset that he's late. He wanted to have time to repay the old man's debt. If he'd come a little earlier... By the way, this boy, Son Baek, he says he finished the sword himself. And since he made the gravestone inscription himself, it means he knows how to write. The general asks, is he Son Baek? The guy replies, that's right. The general says, if he has nowhere else to go, wouldn't he like to go with them? Peck is stunned by this proposal and thinks, everyone who cared about him is gone. He's going to be abandoned again. And now, he won't let it happen again. Peck thanks him for the offer, but declines. The general understands that he would be very sorry to lose such a talented man. He agrees with him and tells him to take care of himself. But then, Lime suddenly runs up and grabs his arm. Lime begs him to come with them. After all, she wants to spend more time with him. After these words, Peck changes his mind and agrees to go with them. But on the way, he thinks about it. He thinks she called him out of pity. The cheap pity of a little girl. But the warmth of her palms was exactly what he sorely missed. Even though he followed them because of Lime's persistence. And suddenly, someone from the convoy announces that they have arrived. The guard orders the guy to dismount. And then Beck is amazed at what he sees. It's Tanbani's house. A woman comes out to greet him and tells him they've returned. Lime, seeing her nanny, runs into her arms and hugs her tightly. Peck gazes at the enormous house in amazement. He thinks it's even bigger than his. No, they can't even be compared. The woman turns to the gentleman and asks about the child. Lime replies, it's Brother Son. And then the general says, it was he who brought him with him. Peck is shocked by the way he was introduced. The general turns to Mo Yeon and says that from now on, he will take care of this child. Mo is taken aback. What? The general is surprised by such an answer and asks, does he really not want to? Mo sighs and tells the boy to follow him. He's got his hands full, and now he's got a kid on top of that. Peck thinks. Back then, he didn't understand why everyone was so surprised. The maids whispered that they'd heard it themselves. In the east, Bringing a child into a family where there are no men means the appearance of an heir. And then Mo tells the guy he's late. Baek apologizes. He was delayed because he was escorting the lady. Baek immediately calls him General Mo Yeon. Mo Yeon is angry. He told everyone to call him Senior. Baek apologizes and replies, he doesn't understand much. That's why it's difficult for him to remember all his words. Mo asks the guy if he's been preparing for the exam. Baek replies, he trains like an officer every day. Mo says, great, now they'll check how much he's grown. And then he pounces on him. Mo, with his most powerful attack, even bends the stick and commands, let him try to block. Baek isn't shy and easily offers his stick. Mo immediately sees, the boy really is an officer. The basic technique of the four-direction spear, he perfected it in mock battles. Mo asks, how long will he continue to just defend himself? And then Baek notices that the teacher has gotten a little heated up, which means it's time to show everything he's capable of. And now it's easy to get right up close to him. Mo gets angry and asks, why is he smirking? Did he really expect this and become so much stronger? Mo says, well, it can't be helped, and changes his grip on the weapon. Baek immediately notices. Mo starts spinning the stick like a helicopter propeller and commands with an attack. Let him try to reflect this. Unleashing a powerful attack, he achieves incredible results. Mo asks the boy what's wrong with him. Where did all his confidence go? Baek asks the elder what he's talking about. Didn't he use special techniques? Mo asks, does he really think hairs will come out against him on the battlefield? Mastering special techniques is just a stepping stone to the exam, and not the kind of enemy who will fight him according to a memorized pattern in training. And let him not dare forget the reason for his existence. Baek takes it all on himself and feels how heavy these blows are. At this rate, his weapon won't withstand. But suddenly Mo strikes from a distance, and Baek's weapon shatters. He immediately realizes, it's a combat spear. Mo doesn't let up, and rushing into the attack, tells Baek, that's not all. The boy understands. He's strong, but the martial arts of the battlefield? At that moment, Baek decides to take a different approach, and suddenly thrusts one end of his spear into the ground. Mo is astonished. They'll kill him like that. Mo orders him to dodge. But Baek uses a spinning attack and easily blocks the attack. All this time, Baek wears his family mark around his neck. But having gotten out to a secluded place, he decides to pick it up and looks at it closely. He realizes he wants to return to those memories. And then Lime approaches him and tells him about the pendant. She says hello. They haven't seen each other for a while. Baek asks the lady if she's finished. Lime suddenly falls silent and asks angrily, Madam? And then Lime blurts out, it looks like she's mistaken. Baek asks what's wrong. What did he do wrong? Lime turns around and asks, he really doesn't understand? Young Master Song? She decides to speak frankly. She hasn't gone for a walk in a long time. Well, what can she do? That man broke his promise and didn't come. And then Baek calls her Lime. The girl turns around sharply with a smile. What? Didn't she hear? Baek asks Lima to stop teasing him. He should be more careful. She knows the nanny will be angry if he calls her that. And then Lime comes up and takes his hand. Baek is surprised. What is she doing? The girl asks again, what's wrong? He used to give her piggyback rides. Baek replies, but they were kids then. Lime asks, and what about now? And then they both blush, looking at each other. But at that moment, Baek remembers how the nanny had told him not to delude himself. Others might think he was brought in as an adopted son, but to his mistress, he was just a toy. And a toy must behave as it should. Did he understand that? Baek clenches his fists and replies that he remembered. Lime asks brother Son, so what now? Baek immediately squats down and tells her to climb in. Lime is surprised. What is he doing? Baek asks, what do you mean? He thought that's what she was asking. He'd decided she was still a child. And, come to think of it, nothing bad would happen if he carried her on his back. Lima flares up and tells him to stop, and decides that she will go herself. Baek asks what she's thinking. Maybe he should carry her? Lime snaps at him to leave her alone and not to follow her. Baek apologizes, it's his fault, and offers to go with him. Lime asks him not to tag along. Meanwhile, the nanny watches them and sees that Baek is well aware of his situation. The problem, however, lies in the mistress's heart. Afterwards, they finally go for a walk. Reaching the bridge, Lime says to Baek, "Look at the sunset." Baek looks and realizes she's already recovered. Judging by the way her mood changes in a second, she really is still a child. And then he remembers Tonbani. And only 2 people were kind to him without reason. He couldn't protect his grandfather, but he will definitely protect Lime, no matter the cost. But it turns out, they're not the only ones standing on the bridge. There's another man with security. He asks, "Was there ever a girl like that around?" The guards ask the gentleman if he should bring her. The gentleman replies, "No. With such a beauty, simple fun won't be enough for him. And it seems she's from a noble family." He immediately orders his men to find out where she lives. Meanwhile, in front of the imperial palace, the general sits on his knees, looks at the sky, and does not utter a word. Mo asks the general how long he's been sitting like this. Isn't that enough? The general replies, he knows, of course, that disobeying the emperor's decree is tantamount to treason, and if it's so hard for him to wait, let him go home. Mo gets angry and declares he'll go to the palace right now. The emperor might be sitting at the banquet hosted by Chang Maso, which is why he's not coming out. He's not even sure it's the emperor on the throne now, and not Chang Maso. The general tells him to watch his mouth. This Chang is just waiting for a chance to destroy him. Why can't Mo understand that they will seize on even the most trivial reason to remove him from power? The emperor is a wise man. No matter how much Chang tempts him with sweet words, his eyes cannot be deceived. Soon he will understand everything. Until then, he will wait. Inside the palace, people report to the head of the agency, Chang Maso, that the governor-general is still awaiting orders. There are no longer any excuses to refuse him. Chang replies, "How stubborn. What an ignorant general. Does he think it's time to stop?" Military official Sa says there's no point in provoking the governor-general. If he learns that the emperor is gravely ill, his 300,000-strong army will march on the imperial palace. Chang dismisses this. He's too worried. Without the Liaodong army, the country will fall into the hands of the barbarians. And the general knows this better than anyone. But does Sa know that the general of the East is overly concerned about his family, and that in doing so, he's leading himself into a trap? The next day, Lime is looking out the window early in the morning, mending her clothes. But suddenly, she notices with surprise, it's raining. At this time, the stranger stands in front of the palace and, stepping into the mud, grumbles. And it had to rain just when he was going for a new bride. The servant asks if he should get new shoes. The boy replies, "No, that way he'll look more sincere, which will make a strong impression on her." When they reach the palace, the guards ask them who they are. After all, just anyone can't enter here. But the boy asks again, "Who are they?" and immediately orders the servant to show them their family symbol. A guy asks the guard, "Is the son of the Secretary of State a nobody to them?" The guard can't even utter a word. He knows he's in trouble. The boy's servant tells them, "Let them say thank you that the master is in a good mood today." Meanwhile, Baek trains, and he doesn't care what the weather is like outside, because he needs to be strong. But throughout the entire training session, he imagines Lima's face, how she smiles at him and makes eyes, and this is what infuriates him the most. After all, he understands her feelings. But the nanny told him that he is just a toy. Then Lime comes up to him and calls out to him in surprise. Seeing her, Baek realizes he's in trouble. Baek takes a rag, wipes her face, and asks why she went out to the training ground. If she gets sick, the nanny will be angry with him. Lime replies, "But the rain is so heavy. She wanted to take out his umbrella, but he doused her." And then Baek remembers his childhood, lying on the ground, and Lime apologizing to him. But he becomes curious. Why did he suddenly remember this? He couldn't help but burst out laughing. Lime was surprised and asked him why he was laughing. Baek looked at her and saw that she seemed to have grown taller, but she was still a child. It seemed that he was the only one who felt strange. Peck suggested they go because she might catch a cold. Lime got angry and replied that it was all his fault. Then a guy approached them and said he'd finally found it. They turned around to see a stranger approaching, along with his own security detail. Lima asked him who he was. This wasn't a place for strangers to enter. The boy replied that it was offensive. After all, they would become one family. Lima was surprised and asked him what he was talking about. The guy replied that, to tell the truth, he had seen her by chance a few days ago. He liked her, and he wanted to share those feelings with her. He came to propose to her because he considered it the right thing to do for a noble man. No need for a dowry. As for him, his father is State Secretary Lee Tae-chon. And then Lime immediately told him to get out of here. The guy didn't understand and asked, "What?" Peck immediately stood up in front of them and said he'd been told to get lost. The guy said that this boy continues to irritate him. Who is he anyway? Peck immediately wondered who he was. And he remembered Nanny telling him not to be fooled. After all, he was nothing more than his mistress's plaything. Mo also told the guy at training so he wouldn't forget the reason he's here. And then Lime answered for Beck and said that he was her beloved. She fell in love with him from their first meeting. Peck was surprised and turned to her. Lime told him not to look at her like that. It was embarrassing. Peck knew in his head that he had guessed how she felt, but hearing it directly was very awkward. The guy couldn't help but burst out laughing. He asked them if they were making fun of him. The guy said that it looked like he needed to teach them a lesson on how to communicate with a person of the upper class. The guy's guards immediately moved in to attack them. Beck immediately ordered Lima to go inside. Lime immediately started resisting, but Peck told her to listen to him and leave. But suddenly, when confronted by this guy's security, Peck was unable to block the attack and fell to the ground. Peck told Lima to run away from there, but suddenly, the man stepped on the boy with his naked body and started squeezing him. The man told Peck that his techniques, although he had achieved some success in this, he wouldn't pass the exam with such skills. And he's no match for the squad leader. Lime was terrified for him and started screaming at Brother Beck. And then the guy approached them and said that everything was correct. This was a look befitting his status. Lime asked them how dare they come and attack people in someone else's home. She would never let them get away with it. The guy smiled and asked her if he wouldn't let her go. And what would she do? Did she want to tell everyone that the young mistress was in love with her servant? Lima told him he was serious. The boy replied that he had planned to take her as his wife, but if she agreed to be his concubine, he would forgive her. Lime did not dare to humiliate herself in such a way, and after such words, she immediately slapped him. She asked him how dare he? Did he even realize where he was? But the guy immediately kicked her in the stomach. Lime immediately fell to the ground in pain. Seeing this, Peck became extremely angry, but the warrior held the blade to his throat. The warrior told him to sit still, unless he wanted to lose his head. The boy asked the girl whom she had dared to hit. Lime told him she'd make him pay. The boy couldn't help but laugh again. He asked his man to give him a sword, and then the warrior turned to the young gentleman and said that he couldn't. The boy told him to shut up and give him the sword. He wouldn't kill her. The guy told the girl she was quite pretty, and he wondered what her face was like. Now they'll see how she talks after he scratches her face. The warrior saw that his master was going too far. They were ordered to simply scare her a little. He has to stop this crazy guy. The guy told Lima not to move. He might accidentally hurt her. Lime pulled her head back, terrified. The guy laughed and said that now it was even pleasant to look at that little face. Let her cry some more to satisfy him. Meanwhile, Peck was saying that he had promised to protect her. He swore he wouldn't lose her bright smile, and then Peck began to slowly move his head near the sword, drawing blood. The warrior wondered at that moment, what was he doing? Even if he's just an ordinary warrior, if they kill a member of the Eastern clan, there will be problems later. And then Peck drew blood and said he had to protect her. The second warrior knew at that moment he had to stop this right now, before this madman hurt Tonbani. But suddenly, Peck broke free from the warrior's hands and told them to stop him. Peck immediately attacked the others with his blade. The warrior called him a fool. He took the sword from the commander. Does he really think it'll all be over just because he's got a sword in his hands? He'll show him the power of the commander's martial arts. The warrior attacked him in response and shouted that holding a sword in your hands does not mean you know how to use it. And then the warrior saw that he had caught the guy. But suddenly, Baek began to evolve and revealed his true nature. The warrior was very surprised and didn't understand what kind of tree it was. But Baek dodged it and headed for the guy. But the warrior shouted at his master to defend himself. The boy asked his man what he was carrying, but Baek saw no obstacle in front of him and cut his head off. Everyone was surprised by this, and the warriors realized they had lost their young master. Lime was also terrified and shouted to brother Son. Baek didn't expect the day to end like that, and seeing that guy's decapitated head, he realized he had killed a man. He stood rooted to the spot before the body, unable to move. The boy's guards saw him and couldn't believe the young gentleman was dead. The warrior immediately called Baek a bastard and rushed to attack from behind. He aimed to finish the guy off with his most powerful attack, but suddenly, the warrior Mo arrived and stood up for the boy. The warrior was surprised because he recognized the boy. Mo immediately attacked them and asked how the dirty dogs dared to meddle with an unmarried lady. The warrior could not cope with this attack and raised his head and asked Mo why he was here. Mo didn't stop there and began giving Baek lessons. He hit him and asked if he realized what he had done. Baek didn't know what to say to his elder brother and only mumbled. But Mo couldn't resist and raised his hand against him. But suddenly Lime came running and stopped his hand and said that he had done nothing wrong. Mo begged the lady to let him go. But Lime couldn't hold back and immediately burst into tears in front of him. Mo was very angry because this fool had killed the son of the Murum's top leader. And how were they supposed to hush it up now? Lime asked Brother Baek if he was okay, but the boy tried to say he'd killed a man. But suddenly Lime didn't let him say it, and with her warm embrace, she pulled him close to her and told him not to worry. Lime told him not to lose himself, because nothing would happen, and they would get through this. The next day, the general accepted the boy's father within himself and said that he was sorry that his son had died. The man was surprised by this answer and asked with hatred, "What a pity! His son was killed. How will they answer for this?" It was State Secretary Lee Tae-jung. The general asked him if he even dared to talk about responsibility. After that question, Daecheon immediately sat on his ass. Daecheon knew the general of the East could take his head off right now. He asked the general why he was so calm. His son had been hurt in this house. The general thought for a moment and asked, "What would it cost him then to give birth to and raise another child?" Daecheon refused to allow himself to be spoken to in such a manner and asked sternly, "What did he say?" But the door suddenly opened, and Daecheon immediately became wary. At that very moment, Lee Mei entered. Lime immediately fell to her knees and told her father that her brother Son Baek was innocent. All the blame lay with the young master, who had wanted to mock her. Daecheon heard these words and immediately began to deny them, saying it was nonsense. After all, his son couldn't mock his mistress. Daecheon said, "Shouldn't the lady tell the truth now? Or does she think she can settle the situation with such a lie? And let her tell the truth right now. Otherwise, he'll kill her personally." The general couldn't resist breaking his glass in his hands in such anger. The general immediately stood up and asked the advisor what he wanted to say. That his daughter was now lying? Daecheon immediately crouched down and realized things were bad. He understood that no matter how toothless a tiger was, it was still a tiger. And if he loses control of himself, he'll be left without a head. Daecheon thought about it and said that in any case, their lives couldn't be considered equal. The general asked in surprise, "Equal?" Taekon replied that the Secretary of State's son had been killed by an ordinary soldier. It was a sin that threatened the very foundations of their country. The general said that if he were the secretary, he'd simply chop off this ordinary warrior's head. Why should he shout here and ruin his relationship with him? Taekon immediately ordered the general to bring this warrior to him immediately. Lime immediately realized that everything was not going as she wanted, and she knew that Brother Song would be killed. The general told the secretary he was sorry his son was dead, But what brother would stand by and watch his sister be molested? Taekwon was surprised and asked what that meant. The general asked him what he didn't know. Son Baek wasn't just his daughter's bodyguard, he was his adopted son. At this time, Nanny and her servants headed to the young man Son Baek's quarters. Without knocking, they immediately entered the room, and then Baek looked into her eyes and realized that the decision about his fate had finally been made. He had already lived longer than he should have. It was enough that Lima was safe. Baek greeted Nyanya and said they hadn't seen each other for a long time. He then asked if Mrs. Lime was okay. The nanny immediately greeted him and called him young master. Baek was surprised and asked, "What's wrong with them?" The nanny replied that the bath was ready and that he should follow her. At this point, Baek didn't even understand what was happening. At this time, the general was sitting in his room, sipping his tea. But after all this, Baek came to him. The general told him that in these clothes, he seemed like a different person and looked more pleasant. Baek bowed and greeted the head of the family. The general said he'd been completely oblivious to him all this time. He hadn't even realized he'd grown so much. Baek told him no. He was grateful that the head of the family had taken him, an orphan, into his home, and he wanted to apologize for the inconvenience. The general was surprised by his words and said he had many enemies. Given his status, it couldn't be otherwise, and so he's forced to be constantly on guard. He also needs to protect his daughter. Does Baek understand what they're telling him? He can't protect him either. In 3 days, Yeon will be heading to the battlefield with a new squad. Let him go with him. Baek didn't want this and, out of anger, answered the general that everything would be as he ordered. On the walk, Baek remembered the general's words that he would immediately understand how cruel people could be when he arrived at the place. He'd have to kill those vile animals. Baek himself understood how cruel they could be, but he wasn't going to die there, even if he himself could become a beast. But suddenly, he saw the silhouette of a girl standing before his eyes. Baek looked closer and saw the lady. Lime immediately ran up to him and asked him what they should do now, but Pan didn't know what to say. Lime was in great pain at that moment and begged him to say something. Baek told Lima to calm down. After all, they were brother and sister now. Something occurred to the lady, and she said they could leave. Baek was surprised and asked her, "What?" Lime had offered him with all her might that they run away together. They could live together somewhere where no one would find them, and then he wouldn't have to kill people anymore. Baek immediately removed her hands from his shoulders and asked her forgiveness. After that, a couple of days later, Baek came to Lime's windows and said that he was leaving tomorrow and let her forgive him for not being able to fulfill her wish, and they won't see each other for a while. Baek didn't want to leave during these wonderful moments when he and Lime were one. But the general's orders required him to obey, and as he said goodbye, he said he would take care of himself, and he would definitely return. And finally, he left her his locket. The next morning, Mo took charge of the men and told them to be careful. After all, they were holding valuable goods, and they hold supplies for their comrades on the battlefield. Handle them with care. But suddenly he saw Baek, who was heading with him to the battlefield. Mo asked him if he had said goodbye to the lady yet. Baek replied no, and it seemed she was still upset. Mo understood that, whatever the case, a battlefield wasn't a place where a person could survive for long. He felt sorry for the guy now, but maybe it was all for the best. Mo told the boy they were leaving soon, and that he should follow him. But suddenly, someone shouted from behind him, asking him to stop. Baek turned around and saw Nanny arriving. He asked her what was wrong. Nanny told him to take this. The lady handed it to him, and then, taking his things in hand, Baek realized why the lady hadn't seen him for 3 days. She was very worried about him. Meanwhile, Lime had gone up the mountain to her tree and was observing everything around her. But she had come here to say goodbye to Baek. Holding Baek's medallion in her hands, she prayed that he would take care of himself and come to her unharmed. At this time, everything suddenly got worse, because he found himself in the hell of this whole world, where there were no good and bad. The enemy saw someone in the distance, and the commander ordered his men to kill him. Arriving at Baek, they stopped abruptly, because the guy stood there and was ready to finish them off without fear. The barbarian commander ordered his men to finish off the Imperials already, while Commander Mo ordered his troops to stop the barbarians. At the moment of collision with the enemies, the warriors Mo shouted for them to kill every single one, to spare no one. But suddenly, someone shouted for help. Warrior Mo turned around and saw that the boy Baek was fighting the warriors alone and easily overcoming them. At the moment of the battle, Baek turned into a monster who saw no one in his path and destroyed. The barbarians confronted him and told him they would kill him. Baek clutched his spear and replied that they were all non-humans. They were animals. After the solo battle, Baek looked up at the sky and realized he'd survived the day. But for a moment, he paused and wondered which of them was the animal. Mo approached the boy and asked if he couldn't sleep. Baek was surprised and didn't know what to answer. Mo told the guy that he thought tomorrow's fight would be the most serious one in a long time. Baek asked General Mo if he hadn't gone to bed yet. Mo replied that he had asked him to call him senior in private. Mo told him he was a strange guy. He just followed orders without question, not caring about his own life. Baek didn't understand and apologized. Mo replied that he'd been here for 3 years already, and after this battle, he could finally return home. Mo asked the guy if he felt okay. Baek replied that people weren't like people at all. Maybe he too went crazy around them. Mo asked him if he was worried about the lady's reaction. Baek couldn't answer and froze. Mo said he didn't need to hide it from him, and that he shouldn't worry. No matter what he did, she would be on his side, and from now on, Baek should call him Senior. Baek knew he couldn't call him that. After all, for him, Big Brother still evoked the man who abandoned him. But one day, he would definitely call him that. But he couldn't keep his promise. And everything changed. The next day, during the battle, the barbarians shouted that they would finish them off. Every single one of them. Mo saw something was wrong and asked his men what was going on. Why couldn't they contact the rear? The warrior replied to Mo that he had been told that the rear troops had retreated. Mo became angry and said that it was all the Imperial Court's fault. The barbarians watched the battle and said that the enemy's rear was truly exposed. It seemed the Empire had completely lost its mind. The commander of Orat Tazar replied that these insects had become slaves to the struggle for power, forgetting about the security of the country, which is their essence. At this time, Lime was sitting in her room and looking at the medallion that Baek left as a farewell. But Nanny suddenly came in and said she had something to tell her. Lime replied that she had already said she wouldn't accept Mr. Chan's offer, so let her tell her that. And then Nanny said there was news about young Master Son Baek. Lime, hearing her brother's voice, stood up immediately. Lime immediately went outside, realizing that 3 whole years had passed. He was finally back. At this point, the general asked his intelligence officer if this was true. The intelligence officer replied that it was. The warrior replied that General Mo Yun's army had been completely destroyed. But Lime suddenly entered, and hearing these words, fainted. The general did not understand what had happened, and immediately ordered them to call a doctor. The battlefield that day was completely destroyed, and yet, miraculously, Baek survived. But it wasn't all that easy, because he was seriously wounded. Baek looked at all the warriors and told Lima not to worry. He would never die. In the Imperial Palace, Chang sat on his throne, laughing at the news. He asked his men if Mo Yun had really been killed on the battlefield. It would be like leaving an Eastern general without an arm. Jang asked State Secretary Taichung if he liked his gift. Chang asked him how. Would he join him now? Daechon replied that first he had to see the body of Baek, who had killed his son. Let them hand him his head. Then he'll make sure the Eastern general isn't just removed, but accused of treason. Chang asked his servants if they had heard everything. Let them find Son Baek's body and bring it to his feet. At this time, in the vicinity of the Imperial Court, Baek was moving around wounded, making sounds with his spear. Everyone was surprised and frightened, as such a warrior had never been in their area. But the boy didn't care and walked confidently alongside them. Baek looked at the palace and said that the traders must be having a field day here, and he named So-chan. At this time, official So was enjoying himself at his estate. He asked how one could be so happy at 40 years old. The second emperor told him it was much nicer here than in the palace. So replied that it was only natural. How could they afford such a thing at court? The emperor asked. But will everything be all right? He meant with them, and frankly, they were civil servants and couldn't repel another barbarian attack on their own. So why did they help them in the first place? So laughed and replied that everything had already been agreed upon. The Tsar was surprised and asked what he was talking about. So replied that after this incident, the sovereign made a non-aggression pact with the barbarians for a year and let the emperor not be nervous and listen, for the sake of their future. Suddenly, a loud crash sounded, and the glass caught in So's hands. She even began to move. Someone outside was shouting for the enemy to stop. The Tsar asked what was going on there. And then the doors opened, and the wounded Paek entered the room where the two traitors were having fun. The emperor asked him how he dared to barge in here. But Paek didn't listen to him and chopped off his head. So stood there, frightened, at a loss for words. But Baek asked official, so what had happened to it? So immediately told him to stop and think about the consequences. If he killed him, Paek raised his spear and told him not to worry. He'd soon meet his damn eunuch friend on the other side. So realized the boy wouldn't stop there and begged him to stop. But it was too late. Baek swung his spear and cut off his head. The streets were bustling with activity at this time. Everyone was out and about, having fun. Girls were pestering boys and asking them out for fun. But suddenly, one of the guys stopped, and seeing people, asked where the warriors from the border were from. The man told the warrior that it was here, and they stopped right in front of the brothel. The brothel owner, Bo Chung, seeing familiar faces, said that she welcomed Mr. Chung. Chung was surprised and asked them if they all knew him. He was the commander of the 10th Army. Bo asked how she couldn't know when the whole city was talking about him. And young Master Song was inside. She'd see him out. Chan leaned against the girl and said that few people knew about him. For a mere courtesan, she knew too much. Chan went into the room and told Bo that he would come see her again after he sorted everything out. Bo looked at him with hatred and understood that Chong had become the head of the 10th Army at only 30 years old. They say he's a kind man, but in reality, he's a cunning fox. Chan went into the crime scene and was amazed. He said it was amazing work. Jung saw Baek and said it was his doing. So he really was alive. Baek, meanwhile, was sitting on the couch, glaring menacingly at the boy. The next day, Lime received the news and ran straight to town to see if it was true. The nanny shouted after her to wait. People in the city were asking, "What's going on here?" Had this criminal really decided to commit treason? By this time, Lime had arrived and walked straight through the crowd to take a look. The man was surprised when they nudged him and asked where the woman was from. Lima, seeing the man in the cage, was very surprised and happy because Paek was still alive. And then she burst into tears. At this point, Daechun approached the boss and asked him why not. Chang replied that now was not the best time for Baek to die. Daechun didn't understand and asked the boss what he was talking about. Chang replied that he was the only survivor of that battle with the Mongols, so all attention was now focused on him. In addition, he will have to undergo interrogation about the reason for the murder of official So. But after that, Daechun was upset and said he understood. He ordered them to do their job, and he, in turn, would do his. Chang was angry and knew the secretary was a fool, and if he waited a little longer, he'd get what he wanted. Chan understood that Zhang was remaining neutral, but he brought in Baek, who had killed a government official. He was clearly up to something, and the worst part is, he might have evidence of his connection to Tsar. Until he knows what's on his mind, there's no rush. Chan turned to No Hagwon and said he had a bad feeling, but then he came back and asked the boss if he had called him. Chan said that if Taesung started acting thoughtlessly, he should get rid of him. At this time, Paek was thrown into prison, where there were a large number of guards. But he too was chained up as a criminal. Taesun only wanted revenge on him, and when he came to him in prison, he said that his life was hard. Baek immediately became angry upon seeing his face, but Taesung said he wouldn't let him die in peace. Neither him nor that girl. And then Peck couldn't stand his words and said that he would definitely kill him, and if even one hair falls from Lime's head, he will kill everyone connected to him in any way. He lunged toward him, but the chains were too short and kept him from getting any closer. Daechon said he now clearly sees that the boy is simply a beast in a human body. He should have died there. His death and that girl's death. It's all his fault. The general asked Jong if it was true he could save Baek. Jong slowly raised his glass and replied that he could. But he has one condition. The general immediately asked him, what is the other condition? That he give him Son Baek. The general was very angry that he was being treated so casually. And Chong finally asked him, hadn't he realized it yet? Betraying his army isn't something a mere bureaucrat could pull off. Let the general be vigilant. These bastards won't give in so easily. The general asked him why. After all, Chong had absolutely no interest in politics, so why was he helping him? Jung smiled and replied that Mo Yun was his friend. Wasn't it natural to help those who were close to him? The general thought for a moment and realized what he had suspected. Chang Ma-so, he would have to pay a huge price for what he had done. At this time, Chan Ma-so's follower was pursuing Chong and was on the roof of the house at the time. But fortunately, he thought, it seemed he had no evidence leading to Jung Ma-so. The problem was Daechon. It would be dangerous if he did something, but he said he had to report it. But suddenly, he heard Madame Lime screaming. She was asking Nanny to let her in. The nanny held her and said she couldn't. Lime begged her to let her go. After all, she had to go to Brother's son. The nanny asked her mistress to calm down a bit. But he looked at them and was very surprised. But Lime always got her way. And late at night, she decided to quietly leave the palace and go to her brother's song. But suddenly she spun around and saw someone watching her out of the corner of her eye. Then she realized she'd imagined it. But he managed to escape the roof and descend to the ground, remaining unnoticed. But he decided to follow the lady. At this time, Chan was sitting in his palace. But, clutching the swill in his hands, he wondered why he hadn't contacted him. Having broken the glass in his hand, a servant immediately ran to him and asked him if the master was okay. Chan thought at that moment that no matter how capable he was, he could not entrust such a task to a person of unknown origin. Chan asked his man what about Baek's interrogation. The man replied that it would be the day after tomorrow. Chan understood that once the interrogation began, Taechon would be powerless to do anything. But he was confident he would try to do something during that time. If Taeyeon foolishly hurts Baek, then Jung-il Gwang might start bothering him too. That could become a problem. Chan immediately rose from his throne and told the boy to give him the sword. The boy didn't understand and asked him what he meant. Chan smiled with his sinister laugh and told the guy that he would handle everything himself. At this time, Lime was walking around the city and heading to the prison dungeon where Baek was sitting, but suddenly she turned her head and heard a girl standing at the porch, telling passers-by to come in to see them. The girls on the second floor also stood and asked the men to come up to their rooms. Lime met with the girl and told her that she had said that she would do anything for her, but the girl told the lady not to even mention that place. She wouldn't have said that if she'd known what kind of place it was. Lima asked what was wrong with him. The girl replied that the people there were very different from those she had met here. Unlike the nobles, who value cooperation, and the demons, who respect strength, the Halmoon is made up of all sorts of rabble. So, an ordinary person like her, who doesn't know martial arts, has no place there. Besides, Halmoon is located near the red light district, and a beautiful girl like her would be snatched up in no time. Lime replied that she understood everything. This was a very dangerous place, and as she left, she said she would find another way. The girl was very scared after these words, and told the lady not to even think about going there. Lime thought, and understood that this was the only way for her to save Son. When she went to the red light district, she asked a man where she could find a Halmoon establishment. Lime said she'd heard he could be found near a brothel. The man thought for a moment, and then told the lady that they weren't found in every brothel. The Halmoon carefully conceal their identities. It's difficult for the average person to know where they come from, making it difficult to meet them. And apparently, she comes from a wealthy family. So let her leave here before anything happens. After she left, the man wondered how the lady had found out about him. It was a shame, but she wouldn't be able to meet them here. But then a guy came up behind him and asked what they'd just talked about. Walking through the neighborhood, Lime noticed girls jumping on men to seduce them. She was wondering where she could find these Hao Moon. But suddenly a little boy asked her if she was looking for Hao Moon. Lime spoke with him, and they set off on their journey. Along the way, she wondered how far they still had to go. She had already gone far. Would everything be okay with her? She asked the boy, "How much further?" The boy sang along to the song on the way and told the lady that they were almost there. She should be patient for a little while. Lima found all this suspicious, and suddenly the boy told the girl that they had finally arrived. Lima asked, "Is this an abandoned building?" Then the boy turned to the others and said that he had brought her. Suddenly, Lima saw several young men step out in front of her. The man gave the boy a couple of coins and thanked him for the task he'd completed. The boy bowed and said he would await new assignments. Overjoyed, he said goodbye to them. As he was leaving, the boy approached Lima and told her not to be so upset. Everyone lies in this place, because the strong rule here. Lima considered his words, about a place where everyone lies and force rules. But then several guys surrounded her and stared intently. And then one of the guys, apparently the eldest, laughed and said that it seemed the general's daughter had a taste for beauty. So, walking around the red light district like that, Lime took a deep breath and asked them if they really thought they could get away with this. Young Master Chan immediately began to laugh and said that it was an honor for him that the general's daughter remembered the simple son of a merchant. Lima realized it wouldn't be that easy with him, so she pulled out a knife and told the guy not to come any closer. And if he did, she wouldn't just stand there. She asked, "What's wrong with them? Don't they know the consequences if they harm her?" She had already refused his marriage proposal several times. Chan replied that she seemed to have misunderstood something. The general, on the other hand, would be only too pleased. After all, he was the one who proposed to her in the first place. She knows her father is in a difficult situation right now, right? Even if she doesn't end up with him, she's still facing a marriage of convenience. Lima told the guy not to make fun of her. Her father would never do that. And then, unexpectedly, one of the guys jumped on her from behind and grabbed her. The boy begged the mistress to calm down. Lime immediately started screaming for him to let her go right now. The guy smiled and told the lady not to worry. After all, it would be good for both of them. Another guy said that's exactly it. If she accepts the four of them as suitors, she'll be completely free of the general. Lime looked at them all and realized they were like animals. Animals exist not only in war. And then she silently apologized to Brother Song and shed a tear. The man holding the mistress told his friends to get in line. He caught her first, so he would be the husband. But before he could finish speaking, someone stabbed him in the head. Lime immediately managed to break free from his grasp and fell to her knees. Turning around, she saw that the man was already dead. The others were surprised and asked if he was really dead. But one of the guys saw the attacker and showed him where he was. Another guy ran after the attacker and managed to grab a sword. But Chan shouted at them to stop. The guy pulled out his blade and attacked, shouting, "What kind of crazy creature did this to their brother?" Lima said it wasn't her who killed him. It turns out the guy decided to attack the girl and kill her. But at that very moment, he was attacked with several knives and immediately left to die in front of the lady. Lime stood there, confused as to how this was happening. After all, she hadn't told anyone where she was going. But suddenly, someone from the roof of an abandoned house said that he was sorry, but the fun ended there. And of course he's glad that Chan brought Dongbani this far. But he can't leave living witnesses. Then one of the boys got scared by this man, turned around, and started running. Chan was surprised and asked him where he was running. The boy ran away, screaming that he didn't want to die. And passing next to the lady, he didn't even touch her. The mercenary decided not to leave him alive, and with his knife caught up with him and also cut off his head like the others. But the mercenary was not alone, and brought with him a child who framed the lady. Lima immediately recognized the child who had brought her here. The mercenary asked the boy why he should even bother with witnesses. Would he like to come down? The second mercenary immediately replied that he was already on his way. But it turned out they weren't just the two of them, but an entire clan of mercenaries. Chon immediately realized that things were bad for him, and seeing that there was no option to run away, he fell to his knees and begged them to spare him. He said he was the son of a famous man. If they let him go, he'd do whatever they wanted. The mercenary asked the boy, "What do you want?" Chon replied that he was right. Anything. Let them just say it. But at that very moment, the mercenary plunged his hook into the boy's head. The mercenary looked at the girl and realized it was Ton Bonnie. An incredible beauty. She would certainly captivate every man in the Southern Sea, although she would die anyway. Maybe they would at least have some fun with her one last time. But suddenly, another warrior came and killed several of his men. The mercenary was surprised and asked, "Who the hell is this?" Then he attacked the guy from all sides with his hook. But he managed to dodge the hook and somersault to the side several times. He stood on the chain and looked into the mercenary's face. The mercenary said that this style was definitely that man's. He asked the guy why him, but he thought and answered, "Who knows?" And immediately picking up speed along the chain, he pounced on the mercenary. But he did not stop at the last moment and went forward. And having gotten close to the mercenary, he cut off his head. But he landed on the ground and said at the end that he himself did not understand why he did it. But he continued to fight with the other mercenaries and didn't give up. Lime watched the battle and asked who was helping her. The mercenaries immediately realized during the battle that this was definitely no ordinary master. And then, No plunged his blade into his chest. The mercenary asked, "But why him? And why is he interfering with them?" But he stood his ground during the attack and easily repelled it. But when I asked the mercenary, he asked why he was interfering. He also didn't quite understand why he was doing this, but he finished off all the mercenaries around and understood that if they were already here, then it all started there too. But he didn't care anymore. Then suddenly, Lime came up to him and thanked him for saving her. And she survived thanks to him. And then, No froze like a statue, not knowing what to say to her. He immediately thought, upon seeing her eyes, that this was what made him waver. But he turned around and told the lady to go to Jin Wei. And there she would be able to see the one she wanted to see. Lime bowed to him again and thanked him for his help. But as he left, he finished his words. If, of course, Peck was still alive. But at this time, in the prison where Peck was sitting, an army of warriors suddenly descended, who were heading to kill him. Opening the gate to Beck's cell, they ordered him to stand up. It was time for his interrogation. As he headed to the interrogation room, Beck wondered how this was possible. After all, an interrogation at such a time was highly suspicious. Even on the battlefield, late-night interrogations were only conducted in urgent cases. Besides, he's accused of murdering an official, so high-ranking officials will be conducting his interrogation, but they're conducting it now? And then there's their uniform, and this silence all around. But those aren't the sounds of soldiers' footsteps. 3 in front and 2 behind. But suddenly one of the warriors from behind took out a knife and held it behind his back, ready to strike. Peck stopped and asked them if they had started yet. He immediately turned around and decided to attack himself. Having knocked out one of the 3, all the soldiers became alert and prepared to kill Peck on the premises. Peck said there was only one, and he didn't know who they were, but they should hurry up. One of the warriors said that this guy was a fucking bastard and ordered the others to kill him. Peck had no choice but to act on his beast instincts and tear out the throats of his enemies with his teeth. Having finished off all the enemies, he remembered the moment when Theron told him he wouldn't let him die in peace. Both he and that girl. Peck said it was definitely him. He had to go to Lima as soon as possible. After all, she was in danger. But suddenly, someone behind him told him that he really was a little animal. Turning around, he saw Theron standing before him. Peck told Theron he was being impatient. He should have waited a little, and he would have come for his head personally. Theron said that no matter how much he thought about it, it would be best to chop off his head with his own hands. Fortunately, or unfortunately, he was still alive. Theron immediately ordered his servants to bring this guy to him alive. He would personally cut off this beast's head. Having given permission to their men, the warriors immediately pounced on Baek to capture him alive. Baek wasn't afraid of them and decided to fight to the last because he had a promise to Lime. Theron was furious to see his warriors failing. He asked them what they were doing. They couldn't even handle one half-mortal. The warriors told Baek he was a bastard and dodged like a rat. But the guy was smart because his hands were blocked. Baek immediately remembered they were there that day. He hadn't understood it then, but now he clearly sees their sword style. It could be held up as an example to the squad members. And then Baek told them they were weak. Or was it he who had grown stronger? The warrior immediately became enraged and pounced on the attack. The warrior said they'd see how much longer the boy could dodge. But Baek suddenly stopped and recalled a moment from his battle with enemies in the war. He remembered their swords being crude. They resembled wolves. Compared to them, his sword might seem sharp at first glance, but ultimately, theirs lacked pride. And then Baek kicked him, knocking out one of the warriors. The second warrior, seeing his allies finished off, was terrified. Baek understood that the sword of a warrior who had lost his pride to power was the sword of a dog. The warrior immediately pounced on him, asking how he dared kill him. Baek immediately kicked the blade towards himself and, grabbing it with both hands, thrust it into the warrior's chest. The warrior finally told him he was a fucking bastard. Theron looked at him and couldn't believe his eyes. Theron looked at the boy with fear and saw that he wasn't human. He was an animal that had just been released from its cage. Theron immediately decided he had to flee. Baek saw this and wondered if he really expected to survive after what he'd done. But suddenly, Baek saw a familiar figure emerge from around the corner. Lime was surprised to see brother Son. Baek immediately wondered why she was here. Theron started laughing and saying he knew the heavens wouldn't abandon him. Baek immediately shouted at Lima to run. Theron pounced on her, thinking that with her, the beast wouldn't touch him. But suddenly, someone arrived and launched his strongest attack against this advisor and cut him into small pieces. Chan told Theron he was an idiot who had crossed the line. But thanks to Baek, he was able to resolve the situation much more easily. Chang looked at the lady and said it seemed the rumors had been downplayed. Now he understood why the gentlemen were worried, and Lime's beauty could destroy this country. At that moment, Lima didn't understand what was happening. Her body wasn't moving. Chang understood at that moment that if he used her, he could make the emperor's place his own and get rid of the general of the east. Chan used all his strength and told the girl to take his hand and he would give her the whole world. But Lime was shocked by everything she saw. With a trembling voice, she asked the enemy what he was talking about, but Chan looked at her with admiration and said nothing. But by that time, Baek ran up and told him to get away from her. But at that moment, Baek drew his sword and launched a crushing attack. Chang, however, was expecting it and easily parried the attack. Baek was very surprised and immediately wondered where this man got so much strength from. Chang said that he had once heard that he was called a beast, but he did not think that he was capable of mastering the Tao. And with these words, he used his flowing sword and launched a counterattack. But Baek managed to present his defense to deflect the attack. But the tip of the sword was so sharp and long that it almost reached the boy's face. But Baek managed to react and parried it. Baek looked at it from a different angle and realized it was a snake shaped like a sword. And in the end, it takes on a different form. The boy, seeing the snake in front of his face, immediately realized it was dangerous and needed to dodge. Chan started laughing after that and said the guy rolled on the ground. And that was pretty good. Baek stopped at a distance and looked into the enemy's face. He was wondering how he could defeat him. But Chan didn't stop there and attacked again, saying that he was sorry, but he had more than one snake. Having released another snake, he said that he would spare his life if he could avoid it. Baek looked at the enemy, and suddenly several snakes appeared in front of him, ready to devour him. Lime was also panicking, and, seeing this, shouted to her brother Son. But Baek fought them, causing a huge explosion. The earth was completely destroyed after this, and Lime looked into the distance and did not know if her brother Song was alive. But Chan suddenly told the boy that he had surprised him and hadn't thought he could dodge such an attack. Chan became curious and asked if the boy was really the warrior's son. His technique allowed him to avoid his dragon's attack. After all, a simple soldier couldn't learn this. But Peck listened and realized that everything was happening again. Once again, his past, which he didn't want to remember, helped him. Peck grew angry and told his enemy he was wrong. Chan looked at him and said that, as he had promised earlier, he would spare his life. But he was still curious about something. He heard that the guy was the adopted son of a general in the East. But are he really just brother and sister with her? No matter how you look at it, her gaze doesn't resemble that of a sister worried about her brother. Or, for that matter, his. But don't let the guy get the wrong idea. He doesn't judge him. He rather enjoys taboos. At that moment, Baek immediately realized who this enemy was. The man who spoke so easily about the general. His effeminate manner of speech and superb martial arts skills. He is the head of the military department, which is directly subordinate to the emperor. Chang Maso, the general's archenemy and the mastermind behind it all, asked the boy if he would go with him. After all, having lost on the battlefield, the general became a toothless tiger. Soon he would be devoured, if not by him, then by someone else. But if he followed him, he could make his dream come true. Maso was polite and extended his hand to the boy. Suddenly, everything changed, and a group of guards came to them and immediately turned to Peck. Chan looked at the man running towards him and said that it looked like it was time for him to finish. As he left, he told the boy to think about the offer. Then he jumped into the air and vanished. Baek looked at him and repeated his name. And now he realized that Chang Maso was truly a fearsome man. Both his martial arts prowess and his spirit were powerful. But Lime suddenly ran up to Brother Song and hugged him so tightly, as if she hadn't seen him for several years. Peck told her to stop, but Lime immediately told him she wouldn't let him go. The guards were shocked by what was happening and said that they seemed to be okay. But the teacher was a little angry about this and didn't even know what to say to them. He simply watched and saw how much they loved each other. The teacher said he'd spent so much effort persuading and thought everything would work out now. But the head himself also came to the scene and was angry. The next morning, the servants were already discussing the previous day's events, but Lime walked past them so quickly that she knocked them off their feet. The maid immediately turned to her mistress. But Lima had no time for her and asked their forgiveness. The maid became curious and asked where her mistress was rushing off to in such a hurry. The girl replied that she hadn't seen her so happy in a long time, and he did return yesterday. The maid asked her who had returned. Lime came into the boy's room and caught her breath a little after her run. But smiling, she opened the door and invited Brother Son to have breakfast together. But she was a little shocked by what she saw, because the room was completely empty and her brother was no longer there. In the clan's territory, the chief and Peck were walking and heading to a place where no one would hear them. But Peck looked at the boss and wondered what was wrong with him. He'd suddenly suggested they go for a walk. The chief decided to speak and said that he thought it was the first time they had walked together like this. Baek told the leader that everything was correct. Suddenly, the leader turned and thanked the boy for avenging Mo Yun. After all, Yen was like a son to him. But he couldn't avenge him personally because of his position. Besides, if it weren't for him, disaster would have befallen Lime, and now he's eternally indebted to him. At that moment, Peck listened to the leader and said nothing in response. But Peck said it was nothing compared to the favor the chief had shown him. The chief didn't stay long, however, and ordered the boy to bring him to Czar's head, and then he would fulfill his wish, whatever it might be. Peck was prepared for this, but he couldn't respond. In the evening, Peck went out into the city to think a little about his wish, as ordered by the chief. But Lime was always there, and turning to her brother, she asked him why he was doing this to her. Peck approached her and asked what she was talking about. Lima started screaming that they hadn't had breakfast together in so long, and he just disappeared. And now they've finally met, and he doesn't even care about her? But Peck suddenly froze and didn't know what to say, but his head was completely filled with something else. He was thinking about his desire, as ordered by the chief. Lime asked him if he could hear her, but Peck suddenly couldn't help but laugh. But Lima was shocked and couldn't understand what was happening to him. He started laughing so loudly that everyone just stared at him. Lima asked him why he had suddenly started laughing, but Peck didn't answer and hugged her. Lima blushed deeply after this and turned to her brother, but Peck said he wouldn't let her go again. At that moment, Lima felt the warmth and love she'd been waiting for so long, and now she shed a tear of happiness. The detachment commander came to the chief in the evening and asked him what he ordered the guy to bring to Czar's head. The chieftain replied that everything was correct. He told him to bring to Czar's head. The commander asked if the chieftain understood what that meant. If he failed, his life would be in danger. The leader replied that he was risking something far more valuable than his own life. Shouldn't he pay a fair price for it? Wasn't he right about that? The commander realized that even in this situation, he was using his daughter, and he really is a terrible man. General of the East. The commander realized that things were worse here than he had imagined. The next day, they set out on their journey and gathered as many warriors as were ready to give their lives for the general. The captain told Peck he would be the commander. And now, this army consists of juvenile and adult criminals, and he will continue to lead it. His achievements are not enough to lead elite soldiers. Whatever the reason, killing a boss is a very serious crime. But if he succeeds now, he can wash away his sins. The commander asked the boy if he understood everything. Peck replied that he understood the order completely, but suddenly he heard someone telling Lima not to go towards the army. Lime wanted to say goodbye to her brother, and no one could stop her. Even the servants told her to stop, but she didn't care. Lime ran up to her brother and, taking a breather, began screaming at Peck that he was a complete liar. He'd said earlier that he wouldn't let her go, and he also said that everything would be different. And why is he leaving again now? Peck dismounted and hugged her. He told her it was the last time. Lima was surprised and asked him what he was talking about. Beck didn't waste any time and suggested they get married when he returned. Lima was surprised and happy. She asked him if he was lying. Peck replied that he was making her a promise. Lime was very happy and hugged the guy tightly, but her joy simply clouded her mind that he was leaving and would return in a while. The warriors started shouting and laughing, even saying it was just shameful. The guy was still so green. But a man without a woman is doomed. But one of the warriors was not happy with this news and looked at Peck so angrily that he was ready to kill him. Upon arriving in Yongchon, Major General Yu Cha-hyuk met his guests and greeted the Governor General. The captain asked in surprise, was he the one who became Governor General? But he seemed to think Cha-hyuk was much happier about it. Cha-hyuk asked, how could they not rejoice in their freedom? But suddenly, the lady came out and asked the captain how he had been doing all this time. And now he greets the new Governor General. The Governor General replied that the lady was also here. He had even forgotten. The Governor General told the lady that he would like to stay with her today. Would she mind? The lady was surprised and replied that she would do everything possible for him and would be very happy to have good company. The Governor General said they could then celebrate their return properly. And today they could get drunk like it was their last. But the lady wasn't happy about this, and her anger was overwhelming. But she couldn't say anything to them. As he began drinking, Cha-hyuk said that when he heard the news that this eunuch was being given away, all 10 years of suffering seemed to fall off his shoulders at once. The Governor General remembered that Major General Cha-hyuk was a subordinate of the official So, who reported to Jung Ma-so, and it was he who informed him of their corruption. And be that as it may, this man had betrayed his master. What should he do with him, thought the Governor General. Cha-hyuk unexpectedly thanked the Governor General and said that whether they wanted it or not, it was they who contributed to the death of General Moen, and he thanked the Governor General for giving them a chance to right the wrong. The Governor General raised his glass and told him to take care of it too. Cha-hyuk began to laugh and replied that he should have seen the eunuch's face in person. A few hours later, the Governor General saw Cha-hyuk's face and asked if he was drunk already. Cha-hyuk replied that he was drunk with joy, and he was so glad he had been able to repay that scumbag who had sold out the country. Cha-hyuk suddenly remembered and asked, will everything be okay with the new captain? He got an army of scum, and they also say he's still too young for that. The Governor General replied that he assures General Yu. Cha-hyuk asked what was going on. The Governor General replied that this boy had killed dozens of times more Mongol soldiers than they had. But Paek decided not to go with the Governor General and strolled through the city at night. And he realized he was back in this hell again. But this time, he was definitely here, and it wasn't a dream. But without wasting any time, he went to his army and woke everyone up. The soldiers were asking what the gathering was all about so late at night, and it seemed like something urgent. The commander's right-hand man told everyone to listen carefully. A new commander, Son Baek, had arrived. The soldiers were shocked and asked, "Is this kid their captain?" And what kind of joke was the commander's right-hand man telling? The commander's right-hand man got angry and ordered everyone to shut up. But the soldiers started shouting that he was a child and definitely not a captain. He'd just been torn from his mother's breast. The soldiers didn't accept him as captain and started laughing at him. They even said this wasn't a playground. The captain's right hand saw that this man was so strong that he was nicknamed a bull. But still, he was still a child, and it would be difficult for him to cope with the criminals. Paek turned to them and asked what they should do next. The captain's right-hand man apologized and asked him to repeat it. Paek replied that he was asking what should be done with those who refused to obey orders. The guy said he knew they needed to be executed. Paek made up his mind and said that no matter what kind of soldiers they were, an order was an order. The boy was surprised and turned to the commander. But Paek didn't stop and headed toward the warriors. But suddenly, the biggest warrior stood before him. The warrior asked him what was wrong. He'd just been standing there quietly. But Paek didn't bother talking to him and instead hit him hard on the head, knocking out even the big guy's teeth. Then Paek didn't stop there and continued his attack with his leg, lifting it up to the big guy's head. Paek told the soldiers he was only warning them once. Then he turned and went about his business. All the soldiers were greatly surprised by his strength and did not even imagine that he was such a great and powerful captain. But one of the soldiers, who didn't like Paek, wondered how he'd figured that out. It turns out this guy was the most aggressive of them all. And for criminals, this would be the most effective form of control. And frankly, he was curious about the man she'd fallen in love with. The soldier became very curious and always wondered who this man named Son Baek was. After their introduction, he held a meeting of all the soldiers and approached Soldier Nam. He asked the young man if he had any military experience. Nam wasn't expecting such a question, and, after thinking about it, answered no. Paek asked everyone if none of them had ever been to the battlefield, but the soldiers were all simply silent at that moment and didn't even know what to answer to the captain's question. Paek remembered hearing that the previous army had been completely destroyed, so they had hastily assembled a new one. But even so, he didn't think that they had taken people who had no experience at all. But suddenly, a guy from the crowd raised his hand and said that he was the captain of the first squad, Cho Changbong. Changbong said he was doing work in Liaodong, but now he has been transferred to Kangong. Baek recalled Liaodong, and according to his recollections, he fought against the Manchu Tungus, and in essence, the Tungus are nomads, just like the Mongols. Paek asked him what he thought was the most comfortable situation for the Mongols. Cho asked in surprise, "Mongols?" After thinking about it, he understood everything and asked the captain if he wanted to attack them in winter. Winter conditions here are different from downtown. Ordering an attack in winter is tantamount to sending soldiers to their deaths. Baek said that the army of soldiers must follow the commander's orders. Starting tomorrow, each squad leader will train their soldiers, and they must wear armor at all times to be ready for battle at any time. But Nam told the captain he wasn't sure they would obey. After all, there are many criminals among them, so problems are inevitable. They have no loyalty, so they can turn their sword against them at any moment. Baek thought for a moment and ordered him to kill anyone who shied away from orders. But Cho, too, was surprised and turned to the commander. But if several people die, then sooner or later it will reach the rest. In the morning, the lady woke up before everyone else and told the master to wake up. But the governor general refused to get up and simply stared at the ceiling. He asked if he could lie like this for a little while longer. The lady replied that no, it was already morning, but the governor general told her that she just wanted to get away from him as quickly as possible. The lady replied that she was sorry, but nothing could be done. she would bring the gentleman some tea. The Governor-General was not happy that he was awakened, and saw that the lady was impenetrable. The Governor-General finished all his business, and, having dressed, asked her how long it had been since they had met. The lady replied that she wasn't sure, about a week. The Governor-General asked her if she shouldn't have gotten used to him at least a little. The lady didn't understand the question, and asked him what he was talking about. The Governor-General replied that he was talking about her real name. The lady asked him what he meant. The Governor-General asked in response, "Isn't it strange? Such a luxurious building stands in such a remote place." So he made some inquiries through his men at the imperial palace. The lady told him it was simply a brothel. The Governor-General started laughing and said that she was right, and it was the Caban brothel. The lady was very surprised and even froze for a moment, not realizing how she had spilled all the tea on the floor. She told him that if he was so sure, she had nothing to say. And he was right. This was Keban's house. And what did he want? The Governor-General thought for a moment and replied that he desired her. The lady was not expecting this and even blushed. The general said that, in truth, he had only gone so far because he did not know how he could become her lover. The girl told him how a high-ranking gentleman could say such a thing to a woman of easy virtue. Even a stray dog would laugh at him. And what does he really want from her? But the Governor-General couldn't resist and immediately kissed her. The Governor-General asked what difference did it make whether she was a servant or a prostitute. He himself didn't know when or where death would overtake him, but the girl was terrified and pushed him aside. She immediately asked him how many times he had seduced women like this. The Governor-General replied that she was the first. The girl asked, how could she believe it? The general said that both heaven and earth knew about it. The girl turned around and replied that he was simply a terrible pervert and womanizer. The Governor-General saw that she felt awkward, and even forgot about her tea. Suddenly, the girl said her name was Yom Okji. The Governor-General was surprised and looked at her strangely, but the girl replied that that was her name. The guy was shocked by this and asked, "Does that mean he won?" Immediately after the conversation, he went out into the forest. He was happy and said it was even funny. How could the heavens look so beautiful? But what should he do? His wayward adopted older brother still can't make up his mind, and the man he followed like a father is trying to drive Son Baek to his death. Saving him would mean betraying the one who was like a father to him, and obeying him would mean killing his sworn younger brother. But suddenly Nam came running and shouted to the general. The general asked him, "He's a member of Son Baek's squad, isn't he? We were told that Captain Son Baek was using sparring as an excuse to kill soldiers." At that moment, within the military territory, Baek was fighting warriors who disobeyed his orders, and he was killing anyone who resisted his words. But Baek, having finished with the soldier, saw the general and said that he had already arrived at the territory of the troops. Nam told the general that for the past few days, he's been killing anyone who disobeys orders. If this continues, people will start running away. The general immediately remembered his brother Mo Yeon. He hated that the first question he'd asked him concerned life and death, and he saved him so many times, and he finally decided that they would save the one whom he considered his adopted younger brother. And when the general of the East said he wanted Tazar's head, he thought it was all over. He even considered abandoning everything and fleeing. But if he saves him, he'll probably be happy. But Mo Yeon still knows. Unlike him, his brother, this guy is a real psycho. Nam was surprised by the general's laughter and turned to him. But the general couldn't stop laughing even louder. The general turned to the boy and said they could try. And now they would slit Tazar's throat. That night, Peng began working on the documents and letters. He began examining each message and reading it from beginning to end. He saw that there were murderers, thieves, and rapists among his ranks. But that was too much even for the scum. There was very little time for their training, but at that moment he took a liking to the letter, and he immediately picked it up to read it. But Nam suddenly entered and told the captain that the general was calling him. Peng went to the meeting and came into the room. The general was sitting at the table with Okji at that moment and greeted Commander Sun. The general asked the commander if he'd like a drink. Peck replied that everything was fine. It would be better to tell him why he'd called him. The general replied that, As Mo Yeon had said, he was a boring guy. But Baek immediately remembered Jung Il-gwang. From Mo Yeon, he heard that, unlike himself, who was only interested in war, Jung Il-gwang also showed interest in politics. He'd heard he was close to Mo Yeon, but he had no ties to the east, so why had he saved him, Baek wondered. The general told the captain there was no need to doubt him. He had saved him because he was consumed by regret over Mo Yeon's death. He hadn't introduced them yet, and she was his fiancée. The girl bowed and said her name was Yeom Ok-ji. Son Baek bowed back and introduced himself. Ok-ji thought the general had said a young commander would be coming. But why did this guy seem so familiar? The general asked her why she was looking at him like that. Did they already know each other? Ok-ji asked in surprise. How so? And suddenly Oxy looked closer and couldn't believe her eyes. She remembered that look, and he was that warrior. The general listened to them and said it was time to get to the heart of the matter. He'd heard that Baek was planning to attack the Mongol army in the winter. Preparation was good, but even so, winter would be difficult for them. Did he have a plan? Ok-ji was surprised to hear about the winter attack, but she knew that in winter, Karyudo, the place where Tazar had settled, freezes over and becomes a fortress. For an army from the Central Plains to march there in winter would be suicide. Besides, to reach Karyudo, they would have to pass through that place. Baek said it was the Umsan mountain range. He planned to march with a small group and destroy the fortress in the center of the Umsan mountains. The general said this was the first he'd heard of a fortress there. Is that their stronghold? Baek replied that he had become convinced of this during his last retreat with the general. He was unknown because no one from the Central Army had managed to return from there. Moreover, the Yumsan Mountains are constantly shrouded in fog and clouds. Until now, the enemy has used this to their advantage. But if it were turned to their advantage, the situation could be radically changed. The general thought for a moment and replied that it was a minor diversion under cover of fog. Was he considering using a fire strategy? Baek was surprised by his question. He'd only said he'd go with a small detachment, but he'd immediately grasped the gist of the plan. He truly was a complex man, and the key to success is gunpowder. It's a valuable resource controlled by the government. The market is occupied by Chang Maso, but somehow we need to get it. The general asked the girl how much gunpowder she could get. Ok-ji replied that first he borrowed money, and now he's got gunpowder too. So many problems for her because of one man. Glasses asked him how much they needed. Baek was surprised that she could get gunpowder and wondered who she even was. And suddenly the general saw his face and said that it seemed that his brother was interested in the identity of his daughter-in-law. And despite his appearance, his daughter-in-law is the head of the Kebun department. Glasses was angry that he revealed her identity. But the general replied that he was his brother. Baek asked in surprise, Kaban? The general said, What do you mean they've decided on gunpowder? And which of the criminals is the captain planning to take with him? The next morning, morning training was underway on the soldiers' premises, and all the soldiers were practicing their techniques. The boy realized he was gradually becoming bored with this life. It looked like war would break out soon, and he'd have to get out of there before then. And even the thought makes me feel suffocated. To think he went so far because of a woman. The boy wondered if he should punch that bastard Baek before leaving. But the teacher saw him slacking off and yelled at him, asking if he was going to practice. Suddenly, Nam ordered them to immediately form up. The soldiers immediately began to say that it looked like Commander Song would kill someone today. But suddenly, a large sack was thrown in front of them, and they were all surprised by this. Opening the bag in front of them, Baek said that this was the price of the lives of those selected for the mission. If they wanted to receive it, they should reduce the number of people to 5. After such proposals, the soldiers began to fight each other to determine who was the strongest. Nam, seeing this, started shouting and asking them to stop immediately. It was too rude, they would lose all their people. But Baek said this mission would be extremely dangerous. Only the strongest should go. We told the commander that this was unacceptable. After the commander's words, a bloodthirsty fight broke out. The general had asked him earlier which of the criminals he was considering taking with him. It would be very problematic if they suddenly decided to escape mid-mission, and as he'd already heard, Many were unhappy with his approach to training. Baek replied that he'd promised them amnesty. Then, instead of punishment for their crimes, they will receive the life of ordinary commoners, and the number of contenders will decrease if we leave behind those who can be forgiven. The general put on a smart face and said that's what he had in mind. He started as a servant and became an adopted son. And now, he has set his sights on the master's precious daughter. But don't misunderstand these words. He's simply amazed at how high he's been able to rise. Still, he knows little about criminals. The general placed a sack on the table and said that this was the best way to make them fight, and let Commander Song exploit their greed. And the greater their greed, the greater their thirst for life. If he gives them half now and promises the other half if they win, that will significantly increase their chances of success. Baek understood that General Jung seemed simple at first glance, but in fact, he understood people. He had heard that Jung was close to Moyeon, but could he be trusted? Baek wondered. Suddenly, one of the warriors turned to him and asked what to do if there were not 5 left, but only 1. Baek looked at the arena and saw that all the people around this guy were lying on the floor and not moving. But he said nothing to the warrior, and simply turned away and made his way to his room. But Nam still thought that no matter how you looked at it, he was nothing more than a child who had just turned 20. He's rude, but he managed to subdue the criminals. He'd heard before that the commander was the adopted son of a general from the east. But what happened to him at such a young age? Nam approached him and said he was interested in something. Baek asked the guy, "What's wrong?" Nam asked, "Why did the commander decide to join the military?" This wasn't the most suitable place for the adopted son of an eastern general, but Baek remained silent and simply continued on his way. Nam was surprised, however, and felt he should have avoided asking him such a question. But Baek turned around and told the boy he had no other choice. And then he asked Nam why he became one. Nam was very surprised and asked, "What?" Baek told the guy that his father and brother were officials. No matter how you look at it, given his family status, he had no reason to be here. Nam immediately realized, after the commander's words, that he was interested in his origins, and Commander Song, who cares about nothing but training. Baek asked the guy if his question was too rude. He replied that it wasn't, because he actually thought the commander cared about nothing but his own goals, and perhaps he was mistaken about him. He told us that his brother had been talented since childhood, and that's why they were always compared. Of course, he loved his brother, but after his brother passed the civil service exam, for some reason, he suddenly lost the desire to learn to read and write. He immediately remembered how his father told his brother that he was a good boy, and he knew that his son could do it. At that moment, he had the feeling that his brother was the only child in the family, and he simply did not exist there, and he even thought that he would not be able to surpass his brother. So he decided to go into military service. Father always praised his older brother, and said that his skills were getting better every day. He wanted to become a civil servant, but now he has no regrets. Baek put his hand on his shoulder and told him he mustn't lose to his brother, and they will definitely bring back Tazar's head. And so that his scribbling brother will look up to him. Baek finished talking to the guy and said that it was time for them to go and get some rest before making a plan. But in the forest, a group of people were dragging baskets from one place to another. But the leader, seeing how they were handling them, ordered them to be more careful. Or were they planning to kill everyone here? The elder began to insult his workers and said that this was why he did not work with the soldiers. Miss Okchi came to them and asked if they had loaded everything. The eldest, seeing her, began to panic and tremble. He pulled himself together and said they were almost done. But why do they need so much gunpowder? With that much, they could demolish a whole mountain. Okchi answered that it was true. They wanted to demolish the mountain. The elder was shocked by her words and asked what she was talking about. He even asked the lady if she was joking. But the bloodthirsty worker saw her and said she was so sweet, and she would be much better than money. Suicide Squad member Chan Oshim told the boy to be patient. Once they completed the mission, he could have a blast. Suicide Squad member Jung Bondu asked if he was really going to let them go. It would have been much easier for him to kill them to shut them up, but Suicide Squad member Gongno told him not to worry. If they were tricked, he'd simply kill this guy who thought he was something. But suddenly, One of the warriors came and asked him if he really thought he could kill him with such skills. They are actually just idiots who still haven't been able to comprehend the situation they've gotten themselves into. Gongno got angry and asked the guy if he'd just won once and become a big shot or something. If he'd had a dagger, things would have been different. The guy said that it had already happened, that he had a sword behind his back that could cut off his head. Gongno began to insult the guy and pulled out his sharp dagger and asked the guy if he wanted to check. But Baek came to them and seeing this asked, "Have they still not decided on ranks?" He asked if they should meet Chongpal, and he would be the one to take them up the mountain. After work, they immediately set out on their long journey. But Pal felt uneasy. He looked at the others on the road and wondered how this had happened. He'd been free of trouble for 25 years. To avoid becoming a pauper, he joined the army and luckily ended up in supply. His only sorrows were the unsuccessful trip to Nanjing and the small salary. But now, he met Commander Baek, who asked him if he knew the mountain terrain well. He saw that the gaze of the boy, who was called the third commander, was so tenacious that he could not lie. Pal replied to the commander that of course, he grew up here, so for him it was like his own backyard. But Baek didn't talk to him for long and placed a bag on the table. Pal was surprised and asked what it was. Baek replied that it was the price of his life. Only now did Pal realize he should have refused. But who knew he'd send him off with the assassins? But he asked the warrior where he was from. The warrior didn't hide anything and replied that he was from Hebei and asked what the point of the question was. But he replied that he was sorry because if he had met him in Hanmai, he would have killed him on the spot. The warrior told him that he didn't even realize how lucky he was to have two hands to hold daggers, but he immediately jumped up and asked him if he wanted to check. What would fall off first? His hands or the guy's head? The warrior immediately grabbed his sword and asked, "But without an arm, he'll shut up, right?" But Pal got angry and told them to stop. After all, they were almost there. Looking ahead, they saw the tails and the narrow road they would have to travel. Pal said it was Yimson, but an eagle, delivering messages, was flying over this mountain. And at that very moment, it flew past and came to its master. Having delivered the letter, he looked down and saw his enemies, and he said that this mountain would become their grave. At that moment, Baek gathered his team and looked at the warriors and said that it looked like everyone was assembled. The commander asked his soldiers how their morale was. They immediately shouted in unison that they were fighting spirited and ready for battle. At that moment, Nam looked at the commander and saw that the atmosphere before the battle was simply incredible. But he too needs to pull himself together. Baek continued, telling the warriors they only had two orders. The first was to win, and the second was to survive. But the soldiers were greatly surprised by such words and said they hadn't heard. Could the commander have told them to survive? Baek told them again that they must survive, not die. At this point, Nam became very worried and fearful. General Jung looked into the distance of the mountain and remembered Mo Yun, how he always said that if the general of the East comes to power, this country will be safe. But he's still plagued by doubts. Will someone who puts the lives of their soldiers at risk be able to do it? But suddenly the commander came to the general and said that the third detachment had already left. General Chan asked how the main force was preparing. Kwanin replied that they could leave the following afternoon. The general said this would be the end of their complicated relationship, and Tazar would have to lose his head. That evening, Baek was already on the move with his army. But Nam was still frightened and kept thinking about the warrior. He even remembered his speech before departure, and the words spoken a few days earlier. He thought he was a commander who didn't care about the lives of his subordinates, but it seems their lives concern him far more than he realizes. But Nam suddenly decided to turn to the commander. Baek asked the boy what was going on. He replied that, frankly speaking, he had more than just an older brother. He also had a younger sister. She was 16 now and looked a lot like him, and he'd like to introduce them if they were back home. She's very beautiful. When Baek heard she was 16, he immediately remembered Lima was the same age, and now he hopes she's doing well. Hearing this, Jongbong asked, "What does that mean? Hadn't he promised to give it to her when they were drinking?" I asked him if he believed the words he'd spoken while drunk. Considering their age difference, That was practically criminal. Jungbon replied that this was the golden age. He was still young. Don't we believe his words? Well, then he could show him. He told the guy what he was going to show us. That's not the most important thing. The soldier suddenly turned to the commander and asked, "Are they sure they'll be able to handle the mission?" And he asked if the commander wasn't worried that they might be caught and escape. They were criminals after all, so their worries weren't unfounded. Peck told him not to worry. Everything would be fine. The warrior asked the commander how he could be so confident in them, and then he remembered the warrior who had defeated them all, and asked him what he should do if there was only one left. Not 5? He immediately noticed the boy's eyes, filled with passionate desire, and that look of confidence. Peck said they would definitely return. The warrior didn't understand the commander's answer and asked, "What?" But Peck didn't continue the conversation and fell silent. At that moment in the mountains, the warrior who had defeated them all realized they had miscalculated. Now he was left alone to fight the enemy, and the information had leaked to them. The wagons were all destroyed, having been ambushed. But Gongno didn't give up easily and continued to fight the enemy. He tried his best to stand firm against one of his most powerful enemies, and his dagger simply deflected the sword's attack. Gongno looked at Pal and told him to help a little. After all, the guide was very frightened and stood next to the cart with his eyes closed. Pal said he was wrong, and they would all die. Gongno tried to reach him and shouted his name, but Pal didn't respond and stood there with his eyes closed the whole time. But Gongno got angry and started calling him obscene names. Gongno checked everything and said he had no choice, and he wanted to use it on that bastard. But the enemy had already pounced on him with his sword and was shouting at Gongno, "What a fool!" After all, what warrior would throw down his weapon? And at the last moment of his blow, he told Gongno to die and say goodbye to his miserable life. Gongno had an ace up his sleeve the whole time, and in a counterattack, he smashed his enemy's head in with his bare hands. Gongno told Mongol to consider it an honor that he used it on him, because he had no idea what it cost him. Having slain the Mongol, he stood over him with his daggers and looked at the body of the slain enemy whom he had finished off. But Gongno didn't know he was using it in a place like this. Looking around, he asked why it was so quiet. What was that idiot doing there, he wondered. Looking at his ally, he was shocked. The Mongol asked him what trick he had used this time. He had heard before that there were people with strange powers among them, and it seemed like they were talking about people like him. The Mongol immediately sensed that this man was very strong, but he wasn't intimidated, and, gripping his sword tightly, he charged. But the warrior didn't even flinch, and, with a few movements of his sword, repelled the enemy's attacks. The Mongol asked what kind of power this was. The warrior replied that it was a rupture technique. Before the Mongol could even utter a word, he began spitting blood. But the warrior did not let him suffer for long, and attacking again, he cut him into 2 parts. The warrior looked around for a bit and said they seemed to be finished here. But the wagon with the gunpowder was broken, so what should they do next, he wondered. Gongno approached Pal and said that everything was fine now, and that he could now open his eyes. But the warrior suddenly felt someone attacking him. He immediately lay down on the ground and shouted that they were being attacked with arrows. Looking up at the mountain, he spotted one of the archers. The Mongol laughed and said the guy was a good jumper. The warrior thought for a moment and realized he'd almost forgotten about the archers. The Mongol didn't stop, aiming an arrow and telling him to just die already. But at that very moment, the Mongol lost his head, and without even expecting it, he fell from the mountain like a sack. Gongno, seeing this, decided to help his ally and said that he could not leave him to die here. And after all, the warrior must die by his hand. Pal still couldn't come to his senses, and, holding his clothes in his hands, said that this was madness. Gongno got angry and told him to stop whining and put his clothes on already. The warrior told them they needed to reach the Mongol camp. But Gongno was cursing at that moment, as none of his clothes fit him. Gongno asked the guide how far they had to go. Fortunately, due to the thick fog, their bodies wouldn't be found until the following morning. Pal said that if they hurried a little, they'd be there by early morning. The warrior asked, wouldn't they make it by early morning? Pal replied that the risk of detection was too high. The warrior said they needed to hurry if they wanted to do everything before the main troops arrived. Pal asked him if they were seriously planning to go there together. The warrior didn't answer and took the gunpowder into his own hands, but he told the guide that if he didn't want to, he could just run away, and he already knew the way. Gong-no suddenly told the warrior that he seemed to be an expert in martial arts, but what was he even trying to achieve? He doesn't even need the money like he does. So why go so far? The warrior replied that he just wanted to give a loser a good whack. Gong-no asked him what kind of nonsense this was, but the warrior continued on his way and replied that it was something like this. But Gong-no said that was nonsense, that only someone like him could understand. The warrior told him to think what he wanted, but he didn't need to be bothered. Gong-no became angry and shouted at him to answer normally. But the warrior didn't want to talk to him and told him to leave. Gong-no asked the warrior if he was seriously considering abandoning Pal here. The warrior replied that he couldn't drag him against his will. Pal shouted to the boys, "No! He'd go himself." A few hours later, Paek's group arrived at the mountain and saw the dead bodies of the Mongols. But Nam couldn't hold back after that and started vomiting on the side. Paek looked at the bodies and saw that the body had been torn in half. Nam asked if this was the work of a suicide squad. Paek replied that yes, they were doing a pretty good job. Nam said that, to be honest, before he saw all this, he was afraid they would simply run away. He asked the commander how he knew they wouldn't run. Paek stood up and said he'd probably want to punch him in the face once. Nam asked, "What does that even mean? What will he do if there's only one left instead of 5? And earlier, Paek had told the warrior that it seemed he wanted something different. The warrior said that these bastards were so weak that he wanted to compete with the commander. Paek told him to let the warrior survive, and if he survived, he would let him hit him. At this time, Pal and the guys reached the place, and, standing at the top of the mountain, they found the Mongol camp. But the boys proved faster and smarter. They immediately launched an attack on the Mongols, which resulted in a huge firefight. The senior Mongol started shouting to the others to put out the fire quickly. At this rate, everything would burn. The Mongol asked where the damn bastards were. The warrior replied that no matter how hard they looked, they were nowhere to be seen. At that moment, the warrior looked at the fire and realized that with so much gunpowder, the entrance gates would not be breached, and Paek had to arrive in time to attack. But suddenly Gong-no saw the warrior and said he knew he wasn't dead. At that moment, Pal held No to keep him from falling, but Gong-no was badly wounded in the side and tried to hold the wound so as not to lose too much blood. The warrior saw this and asked if he was okay. Gong-no got angry and asked in response, "It looks like he's okay?" The warrior said that surviving here would be harder than he thought. Gong-no replied that he had heard that people who practice martial arts could even fly through the sky, but it seemed even he wouldn't be able to hide from so many soldiers. The warrior asked him why he had suddenly brought this up. Gong-no said he'd distract them, but then he'd take that guy with him. It'd be hard to get him, but he thinks he can drag that noisy kid away. Pal was surprised and told the villain what he was talking about. And to tell the truth, he hates the people from the Marima Association. Gong-no said that these bastards deceive with beautiful words, give hope, and then hit you over the head with a blow. And that's exactly what happened to the bastard he killed. But he seems different. Looking at him, he wanted to study martial arts. The warrior answered him that if he truly wanted this, would he come with him? He would make him so strong that he wouldn't even remember the association. Gong-no said that if he survived, he would agree to it. The warrior replied that he had said so himself, so he wouldn't regret it later. The warrior slowly stripped off his clothes and threw them on the corner. Gong-no was surprised by this and asked what he was doing. He was going to get caught like that. How was he planning on escaping? The warrior told him to hide here until the main forces arrived. Until then, he would fight them. And he will show them a strength that cannot be compared to the Murim Alliance. And they do not abandon their brothers. The warrior immediately stopped them and leaped straight into the crowd of Mongols. Pal was surprised and didn't understand a word he said, but he told him he doubted he'd understood. Pal asked the warrior what he was talking about. Gong-no thought for a moment and replied that it seemed he belonged to a devil cult. The Mongols began to fight with the warrior and shouted throughout the area that they should try to capture him and even kill him. The Mongol asked the warriors what they were doing. He was only one. But the warrior didn't stop and continued to fight the enemy alone. But in a moment, he saw that there were more of them than he thought. And suddenly, one of the strongest Mongols appeared before him. The mightiest Mongol shouted to the warrior that he was finished. But the warrior was undeterred, for he saw enormous prey before him. The Mongol immediately attacked him with his sword and told him to die. But the warrior leaped into the sky and flipped over. He then climbed up the gate and immediately continued fighting the rest of the enemies. The Mongols were unable to do anything against him, and the warrior easily destroyed them one after another. After the kill, he felt he'd overdone it, and now there was only one thing left to do. But he had to hold out until the main forces arrived. The Mongol looked at him and wondered what kind of guy he was. After all, with such abilities, he could easily escape. But why did he feel like he was just stalling for time? But the warrior didn't attack at that moment, simply pacing in a circle. But the Mongol immediately realized he was in that direction. He immediately ordered the archers to shoot right now, and he wants to break down the main gate. The warrior stopped right above the gate and knew that he would give it his all for the last time. And having delivered his strong attack, he hoped that the little one would definitely keep his promise. He delivered a crushing attack with his sword and cut the main gate into 2 parts. But the Mongol shouted to his men to clear the way quickly and let them kill him right now. But Baek too was ambushed between the mountains. And at that moment, archers attacked and wounded Captain Lee. Nam immediately realized there was a mission here. And had they really failed? He immediately told the commander that they needed to retreat. They were destroying them. At that moment, Baek turned around and saw the moment where the Mongol had wounded his soldier. He continued to mock the body, but Baek noticed that there were fewer soldiers in ambush than he thought. But if they were people heading for the fortress, they would certainly have died. Nam told the commander that he needed to decide immediately. Baek understood that at this rate, Tazar's head would fall. But suddenly, there was an explosion on the mountain, and he immediately found it strange. Turning around, he saw fire. Baek immediately realized their house was that way. He asked Nam in surprise, "What is it?" Baek realized his men had succeeded. He immediately ordered Namu to gather his soldiers and follow him. He shouldn't worry about an ambush. Nam was very surprised and asked the commander what he was talking about. But Baek didn't answer and galloped off toward the Mongols' home. But the warrior who carried out the commander's order and who broke down the main door sat on the ground and thought. For some reason, he kept saying he wouldn't do something like that again. And judging by the fact that they haven't arrived yet, things aren't going well for them either. And since their plan had been discovered, there were probably plenty of ambushes awaiting them. But had he overestimated this boy? But then the Mongol came and asked why they were breaking down the gates if there was no one behind them. He immediately pounced on him and told the boy not to think he'd die an easy death. The warrior was completely powerless and understood that death on the battlefield was a blessing for the demon. Although it was a shame, he would have liked to talk just once. But suddenly, everything changed, because someone fired a spear at the Mongol's head and saved his life. The warrior's eyes widened, and he stared at it all in amazement. But the Mongol couldn't hold on for long and collapsed right in front of him. Baek told him he'd done a great job and apologized for being late. But at that moment, the Mongols saw the death of their strongest warrior. The warrior asked the commander if he had come alone. Baek replied that everything was correct and asked what was wrong with that. The warrior asked him if he was serious. What the hell was he doing here alone? Baek told him that if he was worried, he should get up and help. Baek immediately jumped off his horse and ran to fight the rest of the Mongols. But Baek decided not to go without a weapon, and, taking his spear, he jumped into the crowd of Mongols who were ready to give their lives for the chief. The Mongols immediately took up their swords and shouted at him to stop. But Baek disobeyed them and immediately attacked the most talkative one with a spear. But he didn't take just one victim with him, but 2 at once. He didn't care who they were, because he had to carry out his orders. The remaining Mongols simply froze in place, unable to move a step. After all, their enemy was so strong, but the warrior himself was shocked that the captain had broken their spirit with a single attack. But there were too many of them. What was he even going to do with the rest? Paek immediately told him that if he was rested, then he should get his ass off the ground and fight. The warrior was shocked and thought that Paek had seriously decided that it would be just the two of them fighting. Paek asked him if he needed more time, but the warrior took it as sarcasm and began to laugh. After all, he'd seen plenty of crazy people in the demon cult, but this one was a real lunatic. The warrior told the captain he thought his job was already done. Paek immediately replied that in that case, he would give him more money. The warrior said he had the money, but it was better to keep his promise. Paek immediately told him that if he couldn't keep up, he would throw him aside. The warrior replied that he expected as much from him, and he ordered the commander not to grab his legs later. They immediately attacked the Mongols together. The rest of the group of soldiers had already finished their ambush by this time and immediately set out on their way. He realized they were much more delayed than he thought, and he hoped the commander was okay. Arriving at the scene, Nam was shocked and asked what had happened. Paek immediately said they were too late. The warrior told them they couldn't have dragged themselves faster. After all, he really did almost die here. But in Miram, the warrior came to the general and said that he had been informed that Captain Sun's attack on the line had been successful. Chan started laughing and said he knew it, and Brother Song did a really good job. Adjutant Chung Guan-yong said they could now finally stage a diversionary maneuver. It was time to move out. Guan-yun asked, "What about that girl?" Zhang asked in surprise, "What?" The warriors asked him if it was true he was planning to marry after this campaign. "And she's so sweet, they even envy the general." Chan got angry and said it was all true. He was getting married, and were they happy? The soldiers were happy for the general and said that they congratulated him and that he had finally taken the right step. General Zhang asked Adjutant Guan-yong why he was causing this circus. Young replied that they would find out anyway. For them, it was just more good news. The soldiers immediately declared that they swore allegiance to the general. The general hadn't expected this and was even a little embarrassed. But suddenly one of the captains, Chang Yi-san, came for them and realized that now was truly the time of the young. After all, a general younger than him, and even a boy the same age as his nephew, had made their contribution. And now, he's even starting to feel old. But then the warrior asked, "Isn't it terrible that those who have worked hard for decades are left behind because of the young?" Captain Chang Yi-san grew angry and asked who it was. But suddenly, he saw an ordinary warrior standing before him, silent. Chang Yi-san saw that he was an ordinary warrior. But more importantly, how did he know about him? He immediately grabbed his sword, as he found the whole thing suspicious. The soldier told the captain he had pointed his sword at an ordinary soldier. Captain Ye-san asked him who he was. He asked him to state his name. The soldier immediately began removing his protective gear and tossing it aside. Captain Ye-san was shocked and wondered why he was taking off his clothes. The soldier showed his face and asked if that was enough proof. He was here to deliver a message. Captain Yi-san immediately saw the snake mark on his body. He realized they were the emperor's subordinates. But why was his man here? The soldier told the captain to kill Zheng Ilguang. Ye-song was surprised and replied that the boy was suddenly asking him to kill the general. The soldier said this operation would fail either way. Therefore, Commander Chang, focus on protecting and preserving your own life. Commander Ye-song asked why he should kill the general. The soldier replied that it was because he would be the next Governor General. Eastern General Sa Mazong's military advisor ran to his superior to report that Jiang Maso had begun to act. They planned to kill Baek and General Zheng, which will be the first step towards attacking the Eastern General. And now he must report to the Eastern General as soon as possible. Suddenly, a soldier appeared before him and asked Sa Ma-jun where he was headed. Eastern General Sa Ma-zhong's military advisor was surprised and asked how a mere eunuch dared to stop him. Then the soldier dropped a sack at his feet and said it was a gift. Sa Ma-zhong asked, "What kind of gift?" But when he opened his eyes a little, he was shocked by what he saw. Underneath the gift for him was Kondok's head. The soldier said that they had a rat spy, so they had to catch it. But then it suddenly turned out that it was the son of a respected man. What foolishness! Their leader offered him invincible power, but he sided with the old man of the East. And now let military advisor Sa not forget what the consequences of his choice may be. Sa asked, "Did he really kill the emperor?" But no matter how hard they tried, they couldn't kill the Eastern general who saved the emperor's life. And since he turns a blind eye to this, there must be something wrong with his health. The soldier raised his sword over him and said he was even sorry. But he hadn't used his brilliant mind for his master. But Sa told the soldier that of course he was having fun now, but history would still judge them. The soldier didn't care and said it was too trivial for a dying speech. And letting go of his blade, he chopped off Sa's head. But as he left, he told Sa's body that he had made some mistakes, but the general of the East would become the sinner in history. At dawn, Paek asked the warrior if he really wouldn't go with them. He could be of great help with the next attack on Karyudo. The warrior replied that he'd had enough, and he thought that if he did something like that again, he'd lose his life, and he'd simply return to his homeland. Paek asked him if he wasn't sorry. He still hadn't been able to strike. The warrior came up to him, and smiling, replied that everything was fine. He didn't know why, of course, but he truly believed they would meet again. Paek turned around and wished the warriors a safe journey. The warrior now understood that Son Baek was the man the girl was in love with. At first, he thought he was just a boy, but on the battlefield, this man was stronger than anyone. He was strong even without martial arts, but it's strange to imagine how much stronger he could become if he mastered them. Gongno immediately asked the warrior if he liked the commander so much, why didn't he follow him? Was sentimentality creeping up on him? The warrior realized that it didn't matter to him anymore. After thinking it over, he said it was time for them to set out. But at that moment, Pal and the boy looked at each other and froze. The warrior turned to him and asked if he would join them in the demonic cult. Pal was frightened and asked if he was crazy. To the demons? The warrior told him that there were beauties there that couldn't be found in the Middle Lands. Pal said he was already married and even had children. Gongno asked if it was true. The warrior tried to dissuade him and told him to think carefully. Gongno asked if there were really that many beauties there. The warrior immediately turned and looked at him. The warrior said it had nothing to do with him. They had eyes, so his face definitely wouldn't work. Gongno got angry and asked him what he was even talking about. The warrior replied that if not a girl, then he'd definitely find a drinking buddy there. Gongno immediately replied that in that case, he wouldn't go. At the military camp in Haeryudo, General Jung said they would finally do it tomorrow. But Guan Young replied that if Commander Sung arrived in time, their victory would be easy. The general asked with surprise, slightly? But in fact, he thought the battle would drag on for a long time. And yes, most likely. And suddenly, he asked Adjutant Chong how he planned to relax after the war ended. Yen replied that he was thinking of going to Huashan. The general was surprised and asked him if he was sure. Yen replied that yes, his second son was their apprentice. The general laughed and said it was amazing. Huashan is quite famous in the martial arts world. Yen replied that he was just lucky. He just happened to be staying there overnight. But suddenly they heard an explosion, and the general ran out and asked what had happened. The warriors began to shout that they were under attack, and before him, he saw Mongols fighting to the death. Yen immediately told the general that they must retreat immediately, otherwise they would all be killed here. Let the general give the order immediately. At that moment, the Mongol looked at the enemy camp he had burned and loudly declared that they were not going to follow their plan. Near Haeryudo, Son Baek's squad was heading to camp. On the way, Jungbong asked the boy if they weren't eating too fast. Maybe the commander has a secret mistress? He told us to stop joking and check if anyone's lagging behind. After all, he himself said they were eating too fast. Jungbong got angry and stopped, saying that Nam was just a bore and that it was impossible to talk to him about anything. At that moment, Nam realized they were truly in a hurry. They needed to cross the mountain and join part of the main force to attack from the rear, and their current forces would be insufficient for an attack. But it was very strange that the commander was in such a hurry to get to the camp. Suddenly, Baek stopped his horse and, seeing his camp, realized they were too late. The entire camp was burning to the ground, but the voices of the warriors were heard, and they were shouting for everyone to hold on a little longer. The Mongols killed soldiers one after another, and saw no fear in their faces. After all, there were actually more of them. The Mongols rejoiced in their victory, because they had destroyed the entire enemy camp and shouted with confidence. Nam didn't believe it, and tried to ask what was going on here. But Jungbon replied that they had been betrayed. Nam immediately became angry and told him to watch his words. What traitors! The attack on Mount Yumsan was Commander Sun's plan, but suddenly Baek said that the commander of the first squad was right. And perhaps that was why there were so few soldiers on the mountain. They knew about the attack in advance. Changbong asked the commander what he intended to do. At that moment, Baek paused and turned his horse in the opposite direction, but Baek said they'd make a detour and attack Tazar. Nam got really scared and asked, "What?" Nam immediately asked the commander if he really wanted to abandon their allies. Baek asked him in return if he thought they could save any of them now. In war, he learned only how to win. But General Chong continued to fight at that moment, standing alone against the entire Mongol army. Chan asked them what was going on. They should start attacking like real warriors, not brats. Jung looked around and saw that even Namshin had abandoned him, and now he had to finish them all off. But suddenly he remembered how Shin said that in this world, there is no person who wants to die, and in the moment before his death, he'll simply think he's unlucky. But if his death can win the war, he's willing to die sacrificing himself. Jung thought it was funny, because the words that came to mind at that moment belonged not to his love, but to an ordinary guy. Chan said that everything was so, and if his death could end the war, then he was ready to sacrifice his life. He'll kill as many of them as possible, and let Son Baek be sure to bring back Tazar's head. At that moment, Tazar was watching the battle and said that the fight had dragged on much longer than he thought. The servant told the leader they were resisting the inevitable. Tazar replied to the boy, "Didn't he tell you there would be a traitor among them?" He knew the people of the Middle Lands couldn't be trusted. The servant told the leader not to worry. As long as Zhongyil Guang's forces were divided, victory would be his. The servant looked back and saw that Zhongyil Gang had still not been killed. But suddenly, one of the Mongols shouted at the others to stop them, and they were attacked. Tazar, seeing this, stood up and thought. He asked the warrior what was going on. Hadn't they made a deal with that guy? The servant was also very surprised and wondered what had happened, and why was P here? Tazar decided and said that since they had guests, they needed to greet them appropriately. Tazar decided to enter the battle himself and told the armorer to bring him his spear. The servant told the chieftain that they had not yet received confirmation. He will only be able to gain the support of the palace when they are absolutely certain of their defeat. Tazar turned around and told him to go and tell that eunuch that the deal was off. Baek entered the war and began fighting the Mongols to the death. Time after time, he killed each one. Baek looked around and saw that there were more support troops than he thought. And at this rate, he suddenly felt someone attack him from behind and repel his attack. Tazar was surprised by this, because this guy had blocked his spear, and he had good instincts. Tazar immediately shouted that he would fight him personally. But Baek was undeterred and stood before him on his horse. The chief was receiving messages at the time, and told the servant to read the message again. The servant said that the message was that the general was the governor of the East, and his treason was revealed to the world. The new emperor will punish him for the murder of the previous emperor by wiping out 3 generations of his family. But for his enormous contribution to the country's development, he will be the only one to receive forgiveness. And the daughter of the governor-general will appear before the royal court and pay for treason with her life. The leader immediately ordered General Ma to cut off his head and send it to the eunuch. They immediately seized the traitor. He screamed and begged the governor-general to have mercy and forgive him. And finally, he told the governor-general that at this rate, his entire family would disappear. The general asked the leader what he would do. They couldn't stop the traitors from here. The leader became angry and replied that they were going to the Palace of Prosperity. At this time, Lime was in her room, embroidering pictures. But suddenly she pricked her finger, and she said that everything had been wrong since that morning. But suddenly servants came to her and spoke to her. Lima asked the nanny what had happened. The nanny told her that she needed to flee immediately. After all, the gentleman was accused of treason. Lime, hearing these words, was simply speechless and couldn't say anything. But at that moment, Baek was fighting the leader of the Mongol detachment. The battle was evenly matched, with each trying to kill the other. Tazar said he was riding well for a middle dog, but after landing a blow, Baek immediately blocked it. Baek became very angry and, attacking back, told him to shut up. But Tazar was also quick and dodged. But Baek didn't stop and launched another powerful, swift strike. Tazar saw this and dodged. Tazar told him it was a good technique. But Moyun's spear wasn't that light. Tazar launched a powerful attack, but the boy managed to dodge and remained unharmed. But the enemy refused to stop and continued to pursue him. Baek saw this and wondered what he should do. He didn't even have a chance. But he remembered that the Oirots were a Mongol tribe known as forest people. Although they are Western Mongols, they are known for their bravery due to their mixed blood. Other Mongolian tribes call their kings Khans, but the Oirat use their own word, Taishi, for this. The bravery of the Oirots is well known. Take, for example, the Tombo incident, when they captured the emperor of the Ming dynasty. As a sign of recognition by other Mongol tribes, he was the only one who could use a different name, and now he realized that Taishi Oiratov was Tazar. The enemy asked the boy if he was tired already, but now he's disappointed. Baek felt incredibly strong. Tazar told the boy that if he had nothing left to show, he should just die. Baek saw Tazar aiming his spear at him, but now he realized he was superior in strength and skill. Baek was deeply confused and wondered what to do. And suddenly, he remembered being asked if he'd ever considered learning real martial arts. Baek said he knew the warrior was familiar with them, but no matter how you look at it, he'd killed more than him. The warrior replied that he admitted it. He'd done well. But if there were a master here, everything would be different. The techniques he knows are good, but only against those who don't know martial arts. Baek said that was a good excuse. Nothing could be said. The warrior asked him if he really wanted to argue, and now Baek realized that no matter how strong the commander was, he would not be able to cope with someone who knew martial arts. Baek now realized he had only one way to survive. He let go of the horse and descended to the ground. Tazar looked at this and was very surprised. After all, this guy had let go of his horse and was ready to fight like this. But Tazar asked the youth, "What kind of joke is this? The warrior abandoned his horse? He looks ready to die." Baek began to think and decided to remember how it all happened by chance. But it wouldn't work that way. And true martial arts, the one he relied on most,